All right, we are going to be live in just a moment. Hello. Howdy, howdy. Welcome, welcome. As you are streaming in, make sure to like the live, share the live, send it out to more people so we can get more people in here. If you're just joining us for the first time, make sure that you're sharing the live and subscribing. You don't support Trump? You could say that. You could definitely say that. Why Qtop cooks you? I don't think Qtop knows how to cook. Why use the slop in the background? Somebody made me the background. Who am I to ask where they got it from? Look, if you want to make me a better background, by all means. Beer's interaction with the $10. Thank you so much. I actually can't even confirm that this is like an AI background. Like it got text right. It got like the hands right. Are there any practical uses of polonium? That's a good question. I don't know. Who you think woke you up this morning? I did. Do you get offended easily during these debates? No, not really. When are you doing a physics discussion? I did that on Tuesday and on Wednesday. Those are on Tuesdays and Wednesdays every week. Every week, same time. Were you humming Misty Mountain? Yeah. Yes, I was. I haven't, I didn't watch the movie recently. Well, I did somewhat recently, but um, yeah, it's just got into my head somehow. What got me into physics? Black holes being cool, basically. Why are you generalizing a group of people? I'm generalizing an ideology because that's part of the ideology. Like if you have a problem with that, then that's a you issue, I guess. Do you live in the US? Yes, of course. It's the coolest thing you've learned studying your field. Oh, there's so much, but that's for another time. This guy probably never took his mask off during the pandemic. I mean, I did like a normal person. Like when it was appropriate, I absolutely did. I'm anti-science and pro-magic because I live in the swamp. That's a fair answer. Because Biden was so pro-science, we needed someone to prioritize people over science. Wait, so are you telling me that like it was a bad thing that Biden was pro-science? Are you pro-AI or anti-AI? Um, in creative roles, I think it's a tool. I think tools can be used for good and for bad, generally. Why are so many MAGA flat earthers? I don't know if it's true that many MAGAs are flat earthers, but definitely many flat earthers, or almost all flat earthers, are MAGA. What about the science of trans people? Turns out scientists agree with me. Why do you think MAGA people accept their reality? Oh, I have no idea. How's my day? My day's doing okay. You should just stick to science and leave the politics out. I'd love to. If the politics would stay out of the science, that'd be great. Absolutely. I would absolutely love to. Why are your debates locked to 18 plus? That's a TikTok rule. What does MAGA have to do with science? Well, it's more what they don't have to do with it. Namely, they're not doing anything, like they're doing things actively that hurt the scientific endeavor. And they're not doing anything to help the scientific endeavor. Orielko, how's it going?
Hi. So just for a thought experiment, right?
Your mic is
Let's say I
hella
have a
loud, bro.
science. Oh,
Hold on. No,
sorry.
you're good. You're good. To be clear, are you MAGA?
I do support Trump and thereby MAGA, yes.
Okay, sure. And yeah, okay. You said you had a thought experiment. Sure.
Yes. So let's say I have a science experiment that needs $10 billion, dollars,
Mm-hmm.
right? Should I invest that on science or people who are doing jobs? Because it's for science, though, right? $10 billion. Dollars.
Well,
Just for
I
one
mean,
experiment,
it
though.
clearly it depends on what the experiment is. Keep in mind that $10 billion
So let's
does.
say that
Hold on.
we
I
find
wasn't
out
done.
God
I
particle.
wasn't done. It's that $10 billion doesn't just disappear. It pays people to do jobs, right? So like the $10 billion, it's not like you either just burn $10 billion or you pay people to do jobs. That's not a correct comparison. Where do you think that $10 billion is going?
Building the facility for
And
gravitational
who's
wave
and who's building it?
detection.
And who's building it? Who's sourcing the
Uh,
materials? Who's running the materials? Who's designing it? These are jobs.
sure, yes, but this is going to develop a city like Oppenheimer did when he was building nuclear power. And how did that help the America as a whole? Because we're talking about America as a whole, not just one city, right?
Just to be clear, we spend money on projects in individual places all the time, but the Manhattan Project was a Department of Defense project. It was a project because what was it? Roosevelt and then Truman thought it was necessary to bomb Japan. That's why that happened. It had nothing to do with just like advancing science. This was not like a scientific project. This was like a national defense project. Um, that said, nuclear reactors exist because of the Manhattan Project, right? And that's clearly helped so many people because it produces power.
I agree. I'm
So
all
like
for the
what
nuclear, right? But I'm also for the people because what scientists need is that they only require money to invest in their own project, right? So
where do you think that
I'm
money
not
goes?
for So that's where I'm trying to get into, right? So directing money directly into the people who are actually doing good for the economy and passing it to the people hoping that they would pass into the economy is same way
Wait.
them say that do not
This hold on. This doesn't make any
tax cut
sense.
the rich.
This doesn't make any
Mhm.
sense, right? It's not like we're hoping the money goes into the economy from the scientists, right? The scientists are part of the economy. When you pay a scientist, when you pay like a postdoc or a grad student, $40,000, they're part of the economy. That is a wage worker that is working in the United States economy. They are part of the economy. They're spending within the economy. They're earning within the economy. They're employees. They are not just like it's not like, oh, there's science and then there's the economy. Science is part of the economy.
Sure, yes, I do get you, right? But science works more on art, right? Art does not directly contribute to economy. How does art contribute to economy? By selling picture
Wait,
to
to
someone,
be
how does
clear,
that?
how is science
Sure.
an art?
So at this point, engineering is more practical than science itself. So how can you not say that science is not an art?
That's to be clear, that's
Because we
never
have
been the
practical
case.
science in engineering.
That's never been the case. It's never been the case that engineering is like more beneficial to the economy. Generally speaking, basic scientific
Not
research.
beneficial, necessary. That's the difference. Can we do without physicists for today? Yes, but without engineers, we need, let's say, some what do you say, that power lines goes out,
Okay,
right? Do
I
you
mean,
need
look,
engineers
look.
or do you need physicists
If your view
at
is
that
that
point?
like if you have the short-sighted view that we can just like stop funding the sciences because you know
No, I'm not saying
th-
stop funding the sciences. I'm saying
you
that we
are.
should not be all for science. And this 4 year, we need it to be for people. Biden was all for science, so he'd invest
This is
in
a
science more than
wait.
people.
How much money do you think the United States
Hmm.
invests in science?
Not a lot.
So
I get it.
do you really think that that's the issue? That like Biden was overspending on science and it was hurting the people? Like, is that is that really what you think?
So now we have to get into more into the division of the budgets, right? How much does the Department of Defense get as a whole? Because they also have to
Like
hire scientists, but
15%
it
of
is
the
not
budget or
directly.
something like this. Like something like 15% of the
Yes,
budget.
and sure, but they do. How many scientists do they hire? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but not very many. And the
So
projects
let's
that the
go back to
scientists are
the.
working on at the DoD are defense projects. They're not basic scientific research. You don't get hired by the DoD to do basic scientific research and like search for a Higgs boson.
Yeah, because searching for Higgs boson is not important right now than feeding the people when we are in stress, right? Do you agree or no?
To be clear, this is a red
Mhm.
herring. You brought up the DoD. The DoD doesn't do basic scientific research.
It does practical science research. That's what I'm saying. We don't
So then,
need
so
our science research right now.
sci- there is no subset of science that's art, by the way. Art is a separate topic. It's a separate thing.
Then I don't
Science is
think you
a
get science at all.
process.
Science is literally an art at this point. I
It's
don't know what you're
literally
getting.
not an art. In art is a method of human expression. Science is a method of understanding the world around us. These are separate things.
So you don't think game requires any artist to create design the game? Is that what
Sorry,
you're
one more
saying?
time. I don't think what this requires any artists.
Game, game.
Games require
Hmm.
artists because part of the
Video
aspect
games.
that they do is part of the thing that games have is they have some sort of human expression involved in their their depiction of characters or whatever. That's irrelevant though. Complete red herring.
And can you create science? So can you create game without art and mathematics? Because art
Well,
works
so there's
on
art.
top of
There's
mathematics, and you're
art.
clearly differentiating it.
So there's the art part of games. There's the mathematics part of games. There's the software part of games. These are all different parts that go into building a game.
You clearly separate art from itself, which is I get it because you're an atheist
I
too.
separate art
Uh,
from
uh,
itself.
yes,
Look, science. Okay, so have you heard of the acronym STEAM?
yes, science,
Okay,
technology, engineering, and medicine.
no, STEAM. Science, technology, engineering, art, and medicine. No, it's mathematics, not medicine. I'm sorry. There's a reason why science and art are separated in that acronym because they're not the same thing, obviously. And mathematics, despite being, more internal than external, is also separate from art. Like these are
That's
just
Western,
different.
though.
What?
Western. That's you
Okay.
Westernized concept. You
Yeah.
separate
Okay.
science from art.
I
We
live in
don't,
the West. I live in the West. Okay. Your point?
and you were wrong. That's what I'm telling you.
I'm
Just like
wrong. So
your MAGA is that.
So you're telling me that science is
Mhm.
art. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess if you want to think that by all means, it's not relevant to today's society. Science, like generally speaking, investing in scientific investigations has been wildly profitable, wildly beneficial to the human experience, not just in the form of like, our kind of abstract understanding of the world, but just practically speaking, right? Like this is just obviously the case. Um,
You don't
the
get
fact that you
immediate effect on snowball effect, do you? Or are you only
that's
talking about,
nobody's
hey,
talking
there's
about
no such
immediate
thing as
effect.
snowball
That's not
effect?
that's nobody's talking about an immediate effect. That's not why we invest in basic scientific research. We invest in basic scientific research because we know that it always has long-term effects. Like it just seems like it seems like you don't understand that the money that's spent in the economy to fund scientific research is money spent in the economy that boosts the economy. It increases jobs. It increases spending. It increases GDP and things like this. And it's also like generally useful. But like, look, if you want to take the position that it's just not important, that's fine. But then you're just agreeing with my background that MAGA is anti-science.
What I'm agreeing is that I am emphasizing science less than for
Okay, so we
other
agree.
jobs. That's what I'm doing right now.
Okay, so we agree.
And I
MAGA's
would vote
anti-science.
for Trump again and again.
Okay, so we agree. MAGA's anti-science. Cool. Anything
Not
else you want to talk
really.
about?
At this point, yes, but not in
Yeah.
the
Okay, so
future.
you agree. Okay, we agree.
Yeah, I'm anti-science right now.
Okay, cool. Thanks for being here. We agreed. All right, let's bring up another guest. By the way, remember to like the live, share the live, join the Discord if you want. Brian, how's it going?
What's up, man? Is there an echo or am I good?
No, you sound great. Are you
I
MAGA?
sound great. Okay. No, I am not.
Oh,
However, I do think that the left is anti-science. I
okay.
have a
So
master's of
that's
science in applied clinical nutrition. I don't have a PhD like you, but I do know how to specifically look at like nutritional research and
so
then
just to be
other.
clear, the topic is MAGA
Uh,
as anti-science. If you want to talk about the left, you can maybe go on to another live to do that.
well, I just wanted to like bring up one issue to where I think that the left rejects science in the same way that
But
MAGA
but I
does.
don't care. That's not the claim here. That's not the topic of discussion.
Okay.
Like I
All
like
right.
if you wanna bash on the left, that's fine. You can do that. That's just not the
No,
topic
no,
today.
I don't want to bash on the left per se. I just, to me, your position criticizing MAGA for being anti-science is not
Hmm.
justified if you can also show that the left is anti-science. So I
How is
think
it
that it's
unjustified to criticize something for being bad, even if another thing is bad? This is just whataboutism.
okay. So, but my question is, why would you only focus on MAGA and not focus on the
Because
left equally that they're anti-science?
MAGA currently controls the presidency, Congress, and the judiciary, and
So then
they're the ones implementing anti-scientific policies.
were you criticizing the left when they
I'm a
were
I'm
promoting
a
anti-scientific
socialist.
policies?
I'm a
Huh?
socialist. I'm not too fond of like moderate centrist Democrats. So yes,
Okay, but so is the issue just to attack MAGA or is the issue to attack anti-science?
the issue is that the current administration is currently destroying the scientific institutions of the United States.
Okay, so my question then is why wouldn't you just want to attack anti-science in general? Why are you only focused on one party? Because if you were really trying to support science, you would be against anti-science across the board,
Because
regardless of the party.
criticizing the left doesn't actually help science right now. That's why.
Why not?
Because they don't have any control of anything. They don't have any policy influence.
I mean, it's still politics. They can still negotiate. They
They
can
they
still
have
put
no
their foot
policy
down.
influence. They have no power.
You know, even in the Senate with something that requires
Even
over
in the,
60
yeah,
votes, they don't have any power.
even in the Senate, yeah, they have no power.
Okay, well, I think it's one thing to debate anti-science in general. It's one thing to debate anti-science, and you're trying to say
Hmm.
it's just because they're in power. But me personally, I think that's a cop out.
Okay,
And I
yeah, you can cry if you want. You can cry about that. It's fine.
Hey, can you hear
Hey,
me?
how's it going?
What's up?
Are you MAGA?
Not to be, yeah, not to be a troll or anything. I know the guy,
Hold on, are you MAGA?
uh, no, but I had some bad news that are related to Mega and NASA. I don't know if you saw them
I'm very
yesterday,
aware
the
of the
news.
NASA cuts. Yes,
Yeah, fuck
I'm
that
very
shit,
aware.
man.
Yep,
Uh, yeah, that's terrible. Yeah.
but opposition only. So we got to kick you off. Brian, cry more in the comments. Like Jackson,
Hello.
how's it going?
I'm doing good.
Are you MAGA?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And would you say that MAGA is pro-science?
Yes, I would to a certain degree.
Okay. Do you think that MAGA is generally pro-climate change? Do you think that MAGA thinks that humans cause climate change in general?
I think some of the politicians do, and some of them don't, okay? It's not that everybody just in MAGA hates science, it's the fact that they're trying to get rid of some of the taxes being spent
Jackson,
while
how
Elon
old are
Musk
you?
was in charge.
Jackson, how old are you?
13?
Oh, you can't be here. Also, bro doesn't know anything. He's 13. Oh, hey, it's Science First again. Hey, Science First, how's it going?
I'm well, and yourself?
Oh, wait, no, I think I mistook you for somebody else. I'm doing okay. Are you MAGA?
I'm sorry?
Are you MAGA?
I am, yeah.
And have we spoken before?
Yeah, we have.
Oh, okay, so you are the same guy. You are the guy that I thought you were. Okay, that's my bad.
Yeah, it is. It's just, new day, new conversation. It's
Sure,
beautiful outside, so I hope you're
Well, I
you're
think
gonna
that
get
depends on
outside
where
and
you
enjoy
are,
some
right?
weather.
I think that
Yeah,
depends
it
on where you
does.
are.
Yeah, so actually,
What are we talking
I
about today?
actually had a question with science and everything. So it's come out that this flooding is
Mm-hmm.
theorized. If you remember one of the times we spoke, we spoke about cloud seeding, and things along that line, and how that could be stigmatizing sort of the whole climate change is man-made and how bad it is and so on and so forth. And I'm just wondering, I mean, obviously you're probably aware of this flood that just occurred in Texas.
Yeah, the one in
right?
Texas. Yep.
Yeah. Are you aware though that they're now slightly blaming that on cloud seeding?
No, they're blaming it on climate change.
No, they're blaming it on cloud seeding.
According to the
actually.
National Climate Assessment, they got the flood was 20% worse as a result of climate change.
Well, but that area was always known for flooding, right?
Yeah, it was 20% worse as a result of climate change.
Do you know what that area's? Do you know what that area's nickname is?
It was 20% worse as a result of climate change.
Okay, well, that's what you theorize.
That's according to the national climate. That's according to the National Climate Assessment from the NOAA.
Well, right, but I theorize that it's from the cloud seeding.
This isn't a theorizing thing. This isn't a theorizing thing. This is like the scientific consensus.
Well, if there's already a scientific consensus after what, 3 days, 4 days, that's kind of obnoxious, don't you think?
Well, no. This scientific consensus came out before.
You'd have to disprove my cloud seeding.
So this scientific consensus existed before. Before
they admitted
this
that
scientific consensus came out before the Texas flood. The Texas flood is just another example of climate change increasing the severity of rainstorms in Texas. So prior to the 1950s, the amount of water that was being dropped during the heaviest rainstorms was 20% less than it is today. That's directly attributable to climate change.
Yeah, but you understand. Do you know what that area's nickname is?
No, I don't.
So you should look up what that area's nickname is real quick.
I think it's irrelevant for the claim that I'm making.
It's not. That area's nickname is like Flood Alley because they're known for having flash floods like this.
Okay, but the point is the heaviest rainfall, which are the things that causes floods, have been dropping 20% more rain now than they were 70 years ago.
And how can you? So we know that,
and that's directly attributable to climate change.
Well, right, but we know that there's cloud seeding going on in places like Dubai where there's normally no rain. So how can you say that 20% increase?
They do cloud seeding. It's not particularly effective. Wait, you think the cloud seeding in Dubai is causing the flooding in Texas?
No, they do cloud seeding in Texas also.
Oh, okay. So okay. So why'd you bring up Dubai? Why'd you bring up Dubai?
Well, you said that there's 20% more rainfall on Earth, right?
No, 20% more rainfall in Texas.
Okay, but they cloud seed in Texas.
So
you know what cloud seeding is, right?
You know that cloud seeding.
Do you know what cloud seeding is?
I do know what cloud seeding is.
Okay, what's cloud seeding?
It's where you put certain particulate. It's when you put certain particulates into the air to essentially cause clouds to coalesce on that particulate, so that you can hopefully produce water or at least reflect some sunlight.
Okay, can you just say what it is? Or are you just going to...
I just told you what it is.
No, you just said some stupid answer that makes zero sense.
I just told you what cloud seeding is.
The purpose of cloud seeding, so the audience
You didn't ask me what the purpose was. You asked me what it is. You asked me what it is.
What is it?
Yes, I told you what it is. Are you struggling? Or do you have a hard time understanding?
No. I'm just saying it's when
cloud seeding is specifically a process designed to create clouds. Right?
So what kind of clouds, though? Just
clouds
regular
in general.
Clouds?
The hope would be is that they would produce rain in places where they need it.
Naturally, or what kind of clouds? Rain clouds, right?
Yeah. So the cloud seeding that was so I'm looking into this right now. The cloud seeding that was done is insufficient to have produced any of the flooding that happened in Texas.
Oh, that's your opinion, though, right? That's your opinion.
No. This is the opinion of atmospheric scientists, apparently.
Yeah, but if I cloud seed a desert,
this is a great by the way, this is a great example of MAGA being anti-science again.
No, this
instead
is
of just listening to
anti-science.
I'm just listening to what the climate scientists say.
Now, where this area that flooded? Google the name of this area that flooded.
I'm just listening to what the atmospheric scientists say. Are you?
Well, here's the thing: is I'm using my brain, which you should do.
Okay, so you're not listening to the atmospheric scientists. So this is a great example of MAGA being anti-science.
Hold on.
I mean, I am using my brain. I'm recognizing that I'm not well informed on climate science, and neither are you. So we should instead listen to atmospheric scientists.
Let me explain this then.
I'm sure that your conspiracy theory will be interesting. Go ahead.
No, let's put on our thinking caps, okay?
Yeah, let's do that. This will be a first for you.
If we have 100% of the rain right now, right? So it's all normal, right? but there's desert areas where it almost never rains on Earth, but we're still at 100%. Now, if I go to those desert areas and I cause large amounts of rain to come down, how much did I just increase it?
So if you're starting at 0 and then you increase it by any amount, it's increased by infinity.
Well, okay, so you would say about 20%. I would agree about
No,
20%.
no, no, that would be
If they're
infinity.
cloud seeding, if they're
That
cloud
would be
seeding in
infinity.
Texas,
So
if they're
interestingly
cloud
enough,
seeding in Texas and they're cloud seeding in Dubai and they're cloud
sure,
seeding in all
sure.
these
This is
desert
lovely.
areas, if they're not supposed, what do you mean
Yeah,
supposedly?
yeah.
Who's denying
I
the
didn't
science
say
now? You
I
can
didn't
look
say
up the-
supposedly. I didn't say that.
Then what did you just say? Then
I
what did you just
said
say?
that's lovely.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, I mean,
Yeah, so according
is it-
to Bob
no,
Robber,
no,
a
according to
University of
you, Mr.
Illinois.
Physicist,
Nope, I'm reading it
according
right
to
now.
you- Okay, go
I'm
ahead.
going to mute you. Sorry, so then I can actually say something. According to Bob Rauber, a University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign atmospheric scientist who has studied cloud seeding, said with regard to the cloud seeding, the cloud seeding conspiracies in Texas, quote, the amount of energy involved in making storms like that is astronomical compared to anything you can do with cloud seeding. We're talking about a very small increase on a natural process at best. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're talking about a 20% increase.
No, a
Now,
very
Google-
small
now,
increase on a
Google-
natural process
Google
at
what the
at best.
Google what the nickname of that area in Texas is called.
So
It's
just to be
called the-
clear, are we just
it's like
ignoring what the
Flood
atmospheric
Alley.
scientists
They call
say?
it Flash Flood Alley.
Okay, so cool. Are we just ignoring what the atmospheric scientists say?
Well, hold on. Let's use our thinking caps.
No,
again.
hold
Let's
on.
put
Can you
our
answer my
thinking
question?
caps.
No, can you answer my question?
I am. Let's put on our thinking caps.
Okay, so what did I just say?
You said that cloud seeding did not play a significant role in the weather in that area.
Yep, in that flood.
Okay. But now, if we cloud seed in that area, normally 100% rainfall is normal, right? 100%. And we cloud seed and we increase it by, let's say, 20%, didn't we just make it worse?
So 20%
So you have this
is
area, so
attributable
you're
to
gonna-
climate
so let's
change,
leave
not
our
to
think-
cloud
do
seeding.
what?
So do you want to know
Oh,
what?
so-
Do you know what? Want to know what
your
actually happened in the
your
area?
excuse why Flash Flood Alley flooded is climate change.
No,
My
that's not
excuse for
what I'm
Flash
saying.
Flood Alley
You have a hard time listening,
is
don't you?
cloud seeding.
So
No,
you're having
that's
a really
exactly
you're
what you
having a
said.
really hard time. So let me explain. So look,
So you don't think climate change caused the
I'm
flooding?
going to talk now, and I'd like you to not interrupt, okay? So this is an area that gets floods, absolutely. The floods have been 20%
nickname?
worse.
Can you say its nickname real quick?
I thought you said you weren't going to interrupt.
Hold on,
Do I have to
already
mute
asked
you?
like 10 times.
Okay, I have to mute him. So this is an area that gets flash floods. The flash floods are 20% worse now than they were 70 years ago as a result of climate change. Now, regarding the cloud seeding claim, apparently on the afternoon of July 2nd, a single-engine plane operated by the El Segundo, California-based startup Rainmaker flew on a cloud seeding job over Runga, Texas, more than 100 miles southeast of Kerr County, where the flood happened. Over the course of about 20 minutes, it released about 70 grams of silver iodide into a pair of clouds. The mission was followed by a modest drizzle that dropped less than half a centimeter of rain over the parched farms below. Meaning, the cloud seeding was actually successful. It caused just a teeny little bit of rain. And then a few days later, there was a flash flood 100 miles away. These are not related things. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, you sound like you're denying science to me. How do you know
I'm
they're
actually
not
just
related?
quoting scientists.
Are you saying they're not related because the climate scientists that say it's climate change are saying it's not, or is it because you've actually done research into it? Because you didn't know about this cloud seeding thing until about 5 seconds ago.
Yeah, so I'm just listening to what the scientists who study this are saying, and
The
that's
climate
being
change
pro-science.
scientists, yeah. Cloud seeding doesn't affect
No, he's an
anything else on Earth,
so
does it?
So Bob Robber is an
I know,
atmospheric
you know,
scientist.
Here's the thing.
He's not a
is that if
climate
my
change scientist,
okay,
whatever that is.
Go ahead.
So Bob Robber is a atmospheric scientist, not a climate change scientist. He's studied cloud seeding. That's like one of the things that he's well known for. And he was the one who I'm quoting, saying that this is a very, very small effect, if any effect at all, from the cloud seeding. Because the cloud seeding was 100 miles away several days earlier, and the cloud seeding actually had the desired effect. It caused rain in the area that they did the cloud seeding in. It caused a tiny little bit of rain.
So let me ask you something. If your science experiment accidentally killed over 100 people, would you admit that it was your science experiment?
I mean, the person who did the experiment might not, but fortunately, the person who did the experiment isn't the person I'm quoting. Also, cloud seeding is not really experimental. It's just like an explicit thing.
Guy who wants to be right about his science, just like how
Well, no,
want to be
I'm
right about
quoting
your
an
science.
atmospheric scientist who has studied cloud seeding.
You didn't even know until 5 minutes ago that they were
And
cloud seeding in
apparently
that area.
you didn't know that Bob
I
Rauber
did
is
know
not a
that they were
climate
cloud seeding in that
scientist.
area.
He's an atmospheric scientist.
I honestly, I see no difference in the two.
A climate scientist studies the climate. An atmospheric scientist studies the atmosphere.
But wouldn't they have
Those are
overlap?
different.
Wouldn't they have
Sure, they
overlap?
have overlap in the same way biology and
Sure,
chemistry have
sure,
overlap.
okay. Yeah. So climate could be their overlap, right?
No, climate is what climate scientists study.
So
The atmosphere is what atmospheric scientists
don't
study.
the climate.
They might also study cloud seeding, like this guy does. This guy studies cloud
See how
seeding.
you got to keep going around left and right, left and right, left and right. You talk out of both sides of
So,
your mouth. You know what that means?
That's a cool statement to make. So
What,
why
do you know what it
don't
means?
you
It means
defend
that-
how
it means
MAGA's
out of
pro
one side of your
science?
mouth, it means
you have a
out of
position
one
about
side of your
that?
mouth you say it means out of one side of your mouth you say no, and out of the other side you say yes.
I'm sure. So
On one
look,
side,
do you think
say,
that MAGA's
say
pro
he's
science?
an atmospheric scientist, not a climate scientist. You say that
Would
out,
you
of,
say?
out of one side of your mouth.
Well, no, those are
And
two
then the
different
other
things.
side, you say,
those
yeah, he
are
probably
those
does
are two different
study
words,
climate.
right? So climate scientist is different from atmospheric scientist. They are different words, right? We can agree on that, surely.
Yeah. So you're saying that there's
Yep,
0% chance that their cloud seeding had anything
I'm
to do
saying that
with
the scientific
increased flood.
consensus is that the cloud seeding that took place 100 miles away several days earlier had minimal,
Oh, so
if
that's
any,
minimal.
it was minimal. Well, yeah, the
Oh,
Bob
so it
Router.
may have
I mean,
impacted
hey,
it.
look, I wrote this.
Like
I
20%,
read
right?
this.
It might have made it like 20% worse. Maybe
No, that's
10%
not
worse,
minimal.
right?
So Bob Rauber
10% 's
explicitly
not
said.
minimal? What's minimal?
Bob
to you?
Rauber, I'm reading. Look, you have a hard time. Bob Rauber said, "We're talking about a very small increase on a natural process at best." So very small. And so we can actually estimate how small, and the way we can estimate this is by recognizing how much rain the cloud seeding
Small
actually caused. The cloud seeding
Doctor, what
caused
does
less
small
than
mean?
half a centimeter of rain. Less than
Doctor,
half a
what
centimeter
does-
of rain.
Doctor, what does
Less than
well,
half
I
a
mean,
centimeter of rain is
here-
what the cloud
so-
seeding caused.
So,
So-
10 inches, I believe 10 inches of rain
15
is what fell
inches.
total.
15
so
inches
that's
is what
like a
fell.
how much?
15 inches.
15 inches. So, and he said, what, a centimeter?
Half a
So
centimeter.
that's about a 2% increase, right?
Half a centimeter.
Okay, so that's about a 2% increase, right?
That's
That's a
yeah,
pretty
sure.
big increase. That's a pretty big increase.
Well, yeah,
don't you
but the
think?
point is that we don't even. There's not
No,
even
just
evidence.
wave that off. Just
to be
wave that
clear,
off.
science first. Just to be
Uh-huh.
clear, there's no evidence
science
that this
first.
cloud seeding caused. There's no evidence that this cloud seeding caused it.
You just read from your expert that it may
He
have
said
had a small impact.
at best, it may have had a small impact.
2%'s pretty significant. don't you
That
think?
means so at best means at most. That means like that's the highest it could have been.
Yeah, at most. Okay, so let's say it's 2%. Let's say it's 1%. Let's say it's half of that 1%.
Right.
Don't
So
you think that's significant?
no, because the flooding still would have happened. No.
How much? What percentage then did climate change play?
20%.
20% climate change. Oh,
Yeah,
so
that's
we
a difference
shouldn't worry
between
about-
that's a difference between 12 and 15 inches, which is a pretty big difference.
So did climate change affect the pre 1% from cloud seeding or the post 1%?
We have no evidence that the cloud seeding actually caused it. If it caused anything, it was a tiny effect.
The same article you used to say
Yeah,
it was
So
cloud seeding.
if
says
it caused
might have been
anything,
cloud seeding.
if it caused anything, it's a tiny effect. That's the point. We don't know if it caused anything, but if it did, it would have only caused a tiny effect.
It's been 4 days. You
It's been
think
4
that they're
days.
going to know that if it was cloud seeding or
And
not?
yet you somehow know that it is. Wait, so science, do we agree? Science, do we agree that this only caused 1.3%? Do we agree that this cloud seeding caused at most 1.3%?
I mean,
of the flood?
Isn't that
Well,
significant?
okay, now compare it with climate change, which is 20%. Which one is
Okay.
bigger? Which one's bigger?
Okay. So we shouldn't care about cloud seeding then?
No, cloud seeding is generally pretty good. It causes rain in places that need it.
Even though it played a small part in the increase in the flooding here, it's okay.
Let's say it caused a 1% increase or 1.3% increase. Then that's less than half a centimeter. That's a quarter of an inch.
Let's say they're wrong. Let's say they're wrong and it caused a 50% increase.
Okay, so now you're just being anti-science again. That's fine.
No, I'm just
Yeah,
speculating.
you're saying,
I'm
well, what if the science is
they're
wrong?
Mr. Science, I don't deny science. What if they're wrong and it's actually like 50%?
So to be clear, you're like, well, what if the scientists got it wrong? You're the same kind of people who say, what if the Earth is 6,000 years old?
It's been 4 days.
Yes, and cloud seeding is well understood.
Have the actual answers
Cloud
already.
seeding is well understood.
Brainwashed.
Cloud
You're
seeding is well
brainwashed
understood.
if you think, huh?
Cloud seeding is well
Did
understood.
cloud seeding cause the flooding in Dubai?
No.
Oh, it didn't? You might
No,
want to Google that
periodic.
again.
I'm familiar with this example. Flooding
No,
does
you're
happen
not.
periodically in Dubai, yeah. Cloud seeding
No, it
may
doesn't.
have slightly
Dubai is a
exacerbated it, but it
desert.
definitely didn't cause it.
Listen
No.
to what you just said. Listen to what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
In a desert, I mean, yeah, flash flooding does occur in deserts on occasion,
Yes.
sure.
Yep. That's exactly what
they
happened. Yeah.
But listen, Dubai is turning a desert into a tropical
They're
area.
yeah,
Do you
they're
think
trying
that's
to do
bad?
that. No, they're trying to do that.
They're succeeding at it.
Well, no, they're not. Not really.
Yeah, they are.
Have you been to Dubai?
Huh?
Have you been to Dubai? It's
Oh,
not.
no,
It is
I have
not
not.
tropical.
Have you been to Dubai?
Yeah,
When was the last time you were there?
I flew through there, like
Oh, you flew
in February.
Through, oh, well,
Yeah, you can see it. You can see it from the sky.
okay. You flew through Dubai. Okay.
Yeah, you can see it from the sky. It's brown. The whole
Okay.
place is brown.
Yeah, it's a desert where they cloud seed, and you seem to think that does no effect whatsoever. Nothing on flooding. Doesn't impact anything because you don't deny
Look,
science at all, do you?
the point of cloud seeding is to increase rain, and they are trying to increase rain. So it's possible that the increase in rain is slightly contributed to.
Rain?
Not in
Can't we
Dubai.
just use climate change for increased rain?
Not in Dubai.
Why
At least
not?
that's
We
not what
just
the evidence
change the
suggests.
climate there. Aren't they trying to change the climate there?
Yeah, in a localized sense, sure.
Oh, now you can have a localized.
Well, so when we talk about
localized-
climate change, it's generally a global effect. But yeah, they're trying to locally change the climate. So you could call it local climate change if you want.
You don't see how that could globally impact things?
No, I don't think that Dubai's cloud seeding efforts are going to affect anybody outside of Dubai.
You don't think Dubai, let's say Dubai is successful, right? You don't think Dubai changing I don't know, probably a 10 million year old desert into a tropical area would have an effect on the overall climate of the earth?
No, generally not. I mean,
Wow.
Dubai's not very big, so
You
like not really.
Zero sciences, don't you? Man, MAGA just denies so much science.
They do.
It's
They do.
Unbelievable.
Oh, was that an
Yeah.
agreement? It was. Thanks for being here. MAGA does deny so much science. I agree. Let's bring up another guest. Chanch, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing all right. Are you MAGA?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that MAGA's pro-science?
I think they're anti-institution science.
That didn't answer my question.
What do you mean? Well, I mean, what do you mean? Science isn't, the scientific method is different from what I would consider you saying what science is.
Yeah, so do you think that they care about supporting the sciences? Do you think that they care about teaching the sciences? Do you think that they care about promoting the sciences?
Generally, yes.
Okay. What would you say? Is it your position that human-caused climate change is real?
My personal position, probably yes, to some
Okay.
degree. The extent of which is controversial, as I think it should be.
Do you think that humans evolved from non-human apes?
I mean, I believe that there is Darwinian evolution. The extent of our understanding of genetics is currently undergoing a paradigm shift. But yeah, sure.
So, okay, so that was a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that vaccines are generally safe and effective?
Generally, I would say yes, probably.
Okay. Do you think that that brain studies recognize the difference between sex and gender?
That brain studies do what?
That brain studies, or rather more like neurological studies, recognize the difference between sex and gender.
I'm unfamiliar with these studies, so I couldn't give a personal answer to that.
Okay. And so okay, no, those are great answers. I appreciate that. So do you think that generally MAGA agrees with you on those 3 points, or those 4 points?
I think there's a lot of debate within that, which I think is healthy and part of the scientific method. Yeah, I think that if you look at it with in good faith, I think that section of the body politic actually is trying to engender a kind of scientific revolution in that they are rejecting what I would consider the institution of science, the ideologically captured institutions of science, namely in the university and the military industrial complex,
So when you
and
say there's debate,
trying to
who's
explore a
the debate
moral
amongst?
renaissance.
Who's the debate happening amongst?
I think that there's debates amongst the traditional political lines in America, and I think there's also debates within the certain political factions as well.
Wait,
For
so
example, I
I'm
think there's
just curious. So when
debate within
we're
that.
talking about debates about scientific things, right?
Yes.
Okay, and who's having those debates?
Uh, who's having debates about this? The
About like the
actual
existence of
science.
anthropogenic climate change, or like the existence of human evolution from non-human apes, or the debates about vaccine effectiveness, or the debates about like neurological differences between gender and sex. Who's having those debates?
I think that in those topics, I think generally speaking, those debates are being formulated from the what would be considered American liberals versus the political movement colloquially understood as MAGA. Yeah.
Wait, so we're talking about like politicians having these debates, or
The general I mean, these are just generally cultured debates, topics of debate within the
so
culture writ large.
and these are scientific topics, right?
Yes.
So would you say that it should be scientists that are having these debates?
Should it or is it?
Yes, should it?
No, not necessarily. No.
So you don't think that when discussing scientific concepts, the people who are most equipped to understand the evidence, those aren't the people who should be having the debates?
I think those people have the debates, but I don't think that it should be the exclusive domain of a sort of accredited scientists within the institutions of science that are, in some ways, very obviously corrupted and ideologically bent.
That's a unfortunate, great example of my background here. Do you think that like a normal everyday person is equipped to evaluate the evidence of climate change?
I think a normal everyday no.
Okay, do
Personally,
you think
probably
that
not, because they don't have access to that information because it's
okay,
been withheld through firewall
withheld?
or through paywalls, or this type of information is generally paywalled. Like there's not public access to a lot of scientific documentation. This points to my criticism of the institutions of science within the university system.
So you think that just to be clear, you think that the scientists themselves are the ones who are gatekeeping their data?
Am I allowed to freely access published scientific works?
It depends on the work, and it
So
depends on
no.
the journal.
So no, this is not a free and
But that didn't
open
answer my question.
access.
Is it the scientists that are doing the gatekeeping?
Well, who creates the paywalls to these
The
these
journals,
published works?
the for-profit journals
Okay,
that
and
scientists
those
publish
are
in.
they have a relationship with the university system, correct?
Well, yeah, the university pays for access.
To the journals.
Yes, the university gives money to the journals so that the university can access the journals.
Okay, and the
In the same
university
way that
provides the research,
anybody who
right?
wants access to the journal has to pay for it.
And the university provides the research, right, for the journals.
Well, the
to
scientists
publish.
provide the research, and the
And
scientists
where does the money
publish
for
in
the
journals.
research come
Yeah.
from? Where does the money from the research come from?
Well, it depends on what the field is. It can come from government grants. It can also come from just tuition, essentially, from the universities.
And NGOs, for example.
Depends on the field. There aren't a
but
whole lot
there's
of private organizations that do scientific funding.
I'm saying all this to draw a point, is to say that there is a perverse incentive that does have a significant influence on what type of research is done, how, and who can access it.
Hold on, before we get off topic, you didn't answer my question. Is it the scientists who are doing the gatekeeping?
The scientists specifically, no.
Okay,
But the
and so
institution in which they
interestingly
operate,
enough, it's not even the universities, for what it's worth. You can just walk into a university library and you can get journal access. It is the journals, which are for-profit companies, and unfortunately, this is the system we have. I'd love it if it was open access, but it's not. But if you ever do want scientific, like data for from a scientific paper, or if you ever want a copy of a scientific paper, literally all you have to do is email the author, one of the authors of the paper, and they'll send you a copy. So like it's
Okay,
not
but
like
I think
it's not like it's
that's
not
a
accessible.
this is not free. This is not freely accessible to
Well,
most people.
yeah, but
Correct?
you could say the same thing about films. Are films freely accessible? Like no, like
Like
the way that the
movies.
yeah, like no, like movies, yeah.
Yeah, okay, but there's a qualitative difference between film and
Well, the
scientific
point is
research.
they're both intellectual property, and so like yeah, the people who are
Well,
doing the
they're not
distribution are
intellectual
going to
property
demand
because,
fees.
well, in one instance, the intellectual property of film is funded by the private entities of the studios, for example. In the other
Yep,
case,
and then they profit. Yep.
a lot of this funding is actually derived from the state itself, our
And look, I
taxpayers.
absolutely agree that that the journal system should be open access and it shouldn't like be a for-profit institution. I absolutely agree with that.
Great.
Um,
So, would you also consider that
but
there
that's
is
not really a
a
scientific
perverse
institution
incentive?
thing.
I mean, it absolutely is. If the institutions and career trajectories of the scientists depend on the publishing industry and very heavily, which I don't think is arguable, then yes, this perverse incentive here for profit, with their relationships with the universities, which is where the research can meaningfully be done, I think that it creates a huge problem within the institutions and its public
Sorry,
trust.
what's the problem?
That there's a perverse incentive
Perverse incentive to do what?
to in order to get a grant, you must uh, provide a hypothesis, generally speaking, that the most successful grants or allocation of money will tend to be for things that are profitable in the short and long term for something like pharmaceuticals, or are already kind of ideologically aligned with the specific biases of the
What
for-profit
is
publications.
so to be clear, what did okay, hold on. There's a lot that's backwards here. First of all, um the statement that the in order to get a grant, you have to align with the publication's ideologies. The people granting the grants, typically government, sometimes NGO, um, these are not tied to the organizations that own the journals. So the people that make the decisions on the grants are not the same people who make the decisions on whether a paper is accepted from a journal.
You
These
don't
are just
think
separate
that
groups of
the
people.
broader apparatus, you don't think that the broader apparatus of the intelligentsia and the ruling
Oh my
class
god,
of
this is
finance
such a
capital,
conspiracy brain.
you don't think that there's a ruling class of finance and monopoly capital in America?
There absolutely is. I don't think they have a significant influence
Okay, so
on
that's not, you don't,
scientific research.
okay, so who runs the NGOs?
It depends on the NGO. Like there's an NGO called the Simons Foundation, which I mean the guy's dead now, but it was run by a former scientist turned financier. He got very very wealthy by running a private hedge fund, and then he's like, okay, I'm going to donate all my
Okay, so
money to
that's
fund science,
what
to
the
fund mathematics mostly.
private hedge fund is called. The private hedge fund is also in the realm of finance capital.
Yeah, yeah.
Bill Gates
So this guy
runs
is an
monopoly
example. This
capital.
guy's an example of like the ruling class. This guy was an example of like
These
the
are
ruling
all
class
these are
absolutely
all
funding
downstream.
science. But
Right. This is
the
right.
so
So
but to be clear,
downstream of the ruling class.
he wasn't funding climate research, for example. He was funding mathematics. So like it's not like his interests were like ideologically driven, right? He was a mathematician who funded mathematics.
Maybe, but it's still under the purview of one individual as opposed to the broader
Yeah,
will of
and
the people. So
look, I agree.
you are.
So
You see what I'm saying?
Chancha, I absolutely agree. Or Chanch, we should
Okay.
absolutely not require private funding for scientific endeavors. We should have all of our scientific endeavors be publicly funded. Absolutely agree. And in fact,
Okay. So how do you
a
get
lot of
that?
these
How do you get that?
publicly funded grants require open access, by the way, for like the publications that result from the
But
grants.
not all of them.
Well, I mean, like I can't speak for every single grant that's ever been offered, but like the ones that I'm familiar with
Right. So
require open access.
so we agree that there is broadly there's not a uniform open access to public funds, publicly funded publications of
Well,
scientific
that's
research,
because
right? So,
that's because not all science publications are funded publicly, right?
right, but the research oftentimes is.
No, no, like I've never had a government grant. or a U.S. government grant, I should say. I've
You
been
might
funded.
not
I've
have,
been
but
funded by tuition, and I've been funded by private organizations. I've never been
that's
funded
your
by like
own
the DoD or the
subjective
DOE.
experience. Right, right.
Well,
That's
no,
your own
but my point
subjective
my
experience.
point is that there are, like, depending on the field of science and depending on who's actually doing the research, some of those grants will be publicly funded, some of them will not be. And so if you're saying, well, not all of it's publicly available, well, we wouldn't expect it all to be publicly available if it's not all publicly funded.
It should, but all publicly funded science should be publicly available. Can we
And
agree on that?
my understanding is that grants that do come from the government do require open access. I'm sure that there are
Yeah,
exceptions, but like that's my
not,
understanding.
well, the exceptions are within the military-industrial complex. For example, in
Sure,
places like
but
MIT
but none of
specifically,
this
and
has
their
anything to do with
relationships with
the
private companies like, well,
So
it has
we are super far off topic though. Like the claim is that MAGA's anti-science, and that's like pretty evident, and it's actually directly contradictory to your worldview. It's directly contradictory to your worldview because the MAGA's shutting down government grants. They're reducing government grants. They're reducing government spending on science, which would make it publicly accessible.
I mean, you can say that that's a result of that. This is a sort of dogmatic relationship to the scientific method writ large, or you can say in a more charitable way and a more accurate way, in my interpretation, is that they simply do not trust these institutions.
What, NASA? They run NASA. What do you mean they don't trust NASA? What does that mean?
They don't trust it. They don't.
What does that
They
mean?
don't trust it.
Okay, what do they not trust about NASA? What do they not trust about NASA?
That it's related to a state that they don't think represents its interests.
Okay, so then they're anti-science. Like it might be the case that they're anti-science because
No,
they don't trust the institutions, but it's still anti-science.
Here's a perfect analogy for what I think is happening. Are you familiar with the Protestant Reformation?
I am.
Okay, so would you say that the Protestants were anti-Christianity, or were they anti the institution of the church?
You could say that they're they were anti-Christianity as it was. Absolutely. They were also, but more specifically, they were anti. So Christianity had a structure, right? Like they had, like, especially Western Christianity had a structure. You had the Pope, and you had all of these like hierarchy and so on. They were against that, and that's what the church was. That's what Christianity was.
Right. So they took a more orthodox approach to Christianity, right? They're not anti-Christian. They just took an orthodox approach to it. They
took a liberal approach to it. They took a liberal approach to it, not orthodox.
The so-called liberal, orthodox, etc. Where in the Bible does it talk about the institutions of atonement or the Pope? It's nowhere.
Look. When I say liberal, what I mean is that they wanted to disassemble the hierarchy.
Right. I'm saying that,
which is
drawing an analogy from that to this. Mm-hmm. Can you see where I'm tethering to social phenomena, right?
Yeah, sure. The trouble is that the people who are making these decisions are people who are just spreading like false information and believe false things about, the scientific results that we have that describe the world around us. Like, if you believe that the institutions are saying that I don't know, that climate change is going to kill us in 10 years, if that's what you think that like the scientific institutions are saying, that like the scientific consensus is, then of course you might, and you think that that's false, then of course you might say, yeah, we should tear down this institution. They're ruining our whatever. But that's not what the scientific institutions say, right? That's not what the scientific community says. So in order to actually improve something, in order to actually adequately criticize something, you better know what that thing is doing. And MAGA doesn't. They have no idea.
Well, to put a further critique on the institutions of science, I would personally think that the scientific institutions in the West, so to speak, are overly prejudiced towards a kind of outdated empiricism that has not been in favor for hundreds of years.
Outdated empiricism. Care to elaborate?
Yes. I mean, are you familiar with any of the criticisms of empiricism or rationalism?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
Right. So science has the institutions of science in the West privy this type of reductive reasoning that was popularized by the philosophies of empiricism and rationalism that were disproved essentially by Immanuel Kant.
Well, to be clear, rationalism wasn't disproved, right?
Yes, it was.
Strict empiricism was are arguably disproved by thinking about things like color differentiation, for example. But
No, actually, it's
rationalism is just the antithesis of empiricism, right?
no,
So
it's not. Well,
you can't say that they're both disproved. They're polar opposites.
well,
They are, one is the opposite of the
okay.
other.
So, do you have any understanding of the critique of pure reason, the critique of rationalism?
Look, so there are two different, and maybe we're just using words differently. So my understanding of empiricism is that all knowledge can be gained through the senses from the outside world, whereas rationalism is just the view that that's false. That there can be information gained internally, and there can be information gained, and possibly there can be information gained externally. That's neither like
Right. No,
so
that is
you
correct,
can't say
but
they're
what
both
you're
false
missing.
because
No, no.
one is the negation of the other, right?
No, they're not actually. It's a false equivalency.
Well, no,
Rationalism
given the definition that
assumes
I've offered, they are
yes,
one is the negation
you've
of the other. Now,
omitted.
if you mean something else by
You
pure
have.
reason, saying that all knowledge can be gained purely internally, then sure, I would disagree with that as well. I would say that probably it's some mix of both. You can gain knowledge externally and gain knowledge internally.
Rationalism doesn't negate empiricism, but yes, it does assume that outside of sense perception, that you can reason uh, the so-called thing in itself. But this is what is directly criticized in Kant's critique of pure reason, that has been basically the dawn of modern scientific thought.
So
Do
look,
you
I mean,
understand that has also been disproved? Like even rationalism that privies this type of reductionary logic, that has been
so look,
empirically proven to be false through
so just to be
genetic
clear,
behavior.
it's just so we can center the conversation again. You're just saying that modern
Sure.
science is nonsense, or that modern science
I'm
relies
saying
on
that the
features that
I'm
are
saying that the
false, right?
I'm saying that modern science presents itself as untethered to the philosophy of science or of any ideological basis in general. That this is the type of way that the institutions market themselves, whereas actually they are very much indoctrinated, or they are very much tethered to a form of rationalism and reductionism that I think can be empirically proven false. That this
Okay, so
bias
just to
is
be
coming
clear,
from.
you are straight up, and like whether you're correct or not correct, you're straight up saying, yeah, the method used, the philosophy underlying modern scientific
The bias.
techniques is false, which just means that you're anti-science. Like that's just what the
It's not.
phrase
It's not
means.
that it's across the board false. It is that it's missing It is a what would be considered
I mean,
a
you did say
one-sided.
false. You did say that
It is. It
that
is.
this philosophy
Well,
is false, right?
the bias is false through Kant and Hegelian criticism, but it is what would be considered a one-sided approach to science, and I would consider an undialectical and therefore unscientific, generally, way to understand living nature.
Look, I don't know what you mean to say that something is unscientific when, as far as at least the modern understanding of the word is, something is scientific if you've gotten to some conclusion via the scientific process. And there's essentially like a set of rules that you use to get there. Now, you might think that those rules are, you know, too reductive, or maybe they're not enough, maybe they don't cover, maybe they can't account for phenomena, but that's just how we use the word science.
My specific criticism is that they privy reductionism over a kind of dialectical understanding.
I mean, that's not really true. Some sciences do, but not all sciences do.
Hold on. But also that they privy mathematical abstraction as opposed to the real exploration of physical phenomena.
So there's two things there. One is there's some sciences that definitely favor reductionism, like particle physics favors reductionism, but like
particle physics also
also
privies this type of mathematical abstraction.
I was in the middle of a sentence, my guy.
Sorry,
So
I'm just
particle
trying to give
physics
you the full
absolutely
context.
favors reductionism, absolutely. However, there are branches of physics like complexity theory, for example, that are specifically non-reductionist. Like the whole point is to study emergent phenomenon in a non-reductive way. Like so to say that like this scientific thing is like purely like it's not. It's
I'm saying that generally Western science has a bias towards reductionism and mathematical abstraction that I find unscientific and undialectical.
So that may have been the case 70 years ago, but there's been a growing shift towards like emergent phenomena and towards kind of a, I don't want to say like a holistic or like holism investigations towards
It's
holism,
not
but
about
like there's
holism.
more,
It's about
there's like a more, there's like a broader, less reductive take in a lot of different sciences, not just physics. And then the
Okay, but
qualm with mathematics,
when
like the whole point of the scientific process is that you make predictions, you test those predictions. If your predictions are right, great. If your predictions are wrong, then you just start again, right? That's the whole business. And so you can make predictions, you can make qualitative predictions, absolutely. But qualitative predictions just have less precision, if you will, than quantitative predictions, which is why we use mathematics. That's the whole game.
yeah, I mean, I'll get but sometimes that mathematics and the elegance of the mathematics actually is more valued in the scientific community than its observation. For example, I'll use a paradigm that I think is being transitioned now that I think the bias, these type of
Your
reductionist
mic is
bias.
going in and out, by the way.
How about now?
I don't know. You'll have
Better?
to try talking.
Is it better now?
Maybe.
Um, so I'll give you an example of where reductionism is actually heeding, I think, scientific progress, and it's in the field of genetics, in which the paradigm of neo-Darwinism or Mendel-Morganism is being kind of patchwork um, modified through fields like epigenetics, and I think it fails to understand and the failures of things
What does this
like
have to do with
CRISPR,
reductionism?
that the whole paradigm of genetics is to reduce the hereditability of an organism to the immutable gene. And now that that is being proven to be false and
That's why
nature,
they're
that
changing it. That's good.
yeah,
That's what the
they're
scientific process is. You should
but
update when presented with new information.
they're changing it in by creating a new field called epigenetics that
Yep.
actually is still privy its base on the kind of neo-Darwinist
Sure.
view of genetic heredity. Whereas I
Sure.
think that
What's your problem with that?
there are valid criticisms that Mandel Morganism and this type of reductionist metaphysical notion of what a gene is actually but a slice of the overall process of heredity itself that actually is the paradigm shift which we are trending towards with vector. But
Okay, then
because we are privy
wait,
towards
if we're trending towards it, doesn't that mean that that's exactly what the scientists are doing? That they're adapting to
it
new
means
information,
that
they're revising
well
hypotheses?
they're revising hypotheses without revising the underlying paradigm beneath it. So they're simply putting makeup on the pig, so to speak.
Well, wait a
The
minute.
same
So
can be said
what do
of
you want? Do
same
you
can be
do you
said
want
of
them to
cosmology.
throw out do you want them to throw out everything and start over? Like
No, I think
is
that
that
they
what you're
should.
asking for? Because like currently
They
the current paradigm is very, very good at explaining a lot of things. So in order to throw out the paradigm, you would need something that it predicts that's false in an egregious way. And then you might
well,
throw it out and replace it with something better. But currently the current paradigm's really, really good. It's not perfect, but it's really, really good.
I mean, the same could be said about the geocentric view of the universe and of Newtonian physics pre-Einstein. So, like, but those
Newtonian physics wasn't thrown out. You understand that, right?
right, it was sublated by Einstein's theory of relativity.
Right, through the scientific process.
Yeah, but through a completely fundamental reinterpretation of what
Yes,
actually
and it was
the
scientists who did that.
concepts.
It just sounds like you're totally, totally fine with the scientific process doing what the scientific process is good at, which is revising ideas based on new information.
But I think that it's being held captive by a kind of ideologically biased institution of science that doesn't actually give the experimentation necessary, freedom necessary for actual widespread scientific
Do you
processes
think
to
that making
fully
ideologically based grants on do you think that making do you think that restricting grants based on ideological views, like based on the ideological views of the current administration, do you think that restricting grants as a result of that is good or bad for reducing ideological capture of scientific institutions?
I think that first and foremost, you have to understand that ideology is always at the always attached to science. That there is
That
no
wasn't my
sort of
question.
well, I mean, you have to. I assume that ideology undergirds all of science, all of the
That
institutions of
that
science.
wasn't my question. My question wasn't about the institutions, it was about the grant funding agencies.
But what about what specifically about them?
That grants are
Should
being
they be?
restricted on ideological grounds.
Yeah. I mean, one. I think that that happens no matter what.
So do you think that that's a good thing?
I think it's a necessary thing.
You think it's
I mean, it's
necessary to
impossible
restrict
to
grants on
separate.
ideological grounds?
Yes, grants are always restricted based on ideological grants, no matter what,
Not
no matter
not
who's in
not
office.
like this. No, not really.
I mean, it takes a different qualitative sense, but yes, they are
Yeah, so it's
all good to
qualitatively
use.
different. That means that it's not like this.
Well, I mean, maybe qualitative was the wrong word. Maybe it's formal, it's something different, but qualitatively, it's still, but it's still predicated on an
So
ideological
look.
basis.
So let me give you an example. Suppose for a moment that you have a grant that you write a grant proposal and you lay out your experiment and it's like on, I don't know, it's on like chemistry or something like this. So some chemistry grant, and you say XYZ, we're going to test this chemical and then we're going to run blah 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 experiments, blah 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 blah. And in every grant application, there's a few different sections. There's like the objective, there's like the expected returns, there's the time frame, there's the methods, all these things. And there's also sections for like outreach, and there's sections for like impact. And so if during you're writing the scientific grant and then you fill in your section on like the impact and you say, well, we are, or sorry, on the outreach section, you say, well, we are going to, as part of our dissemination of the scientific information, we are going to participate in the Women in STEM symposium where we present our research to a typically underserved community. And that's part of the outreach section of the grant. And then the grant gets denied because it involved, outreach to women. How is that at all helping with the ideological capture of the scientific institutions?
I mean, it's just utilizing a different ideological bias towards
So
its
is this helping or
distribution of
hurting?
grants.
Because the
I
point
would
is
say
the
in
science,
this,
now the
in that
science is not
specific,
getting done. The science, which
in
was
that
not being
specific,
debated at all, the science which was not being
right.
criticized at all, the science which was not ideologically driven at all, is now not getting done as a result of some ideology by the people at the top.
Well, in this specific example, I would agree with you that it
This happened,
hurts, but
by
I
the
would
way,
give you.
this happened to hundreds, if not thousands, of grants in the last year,
Okay, well, I'll give you a counter
last
example.
6 months, I should say.
If I was to try to say, um, attempt to, in efforts to produce more grain yields, you utilize the ideas of Trolem Lysenko in a government grant, it would be rejected on a very similar ideological basis.
So to be clear, to call that a similar ideological basis is the word similar is doing a lot of work there, because on the one hand, the example I gave was a result of a completely unrelated ideology, completely unrelated set of views that like, we shouldn't be spending money on things that are specifically targeting women, for example, even though that's just part of the outreach, it's not part of the main scientific investigation. Whereas the example that you gave is somebody proposing a grant that in an attempt to do something that is almost certain to fail given current scientific knowledge. So
Well,
the ideological
again,
basis the ideological basis that's
you
rejecting your
think that
grant is the ideological basis
you
of it probably won't work, so it's not worth funding.
first of all, you think that this is exactly the point I'm trying to bring in. You are actually probably extremely naive about this very specific practice, but you have the hubris to assume that this is simply doomed to fail. This is a perfect example of your ideological
I did say
basis.
almost certainly for what it's worth, by the way. But go ahead.
Okay, but again, under what purview do you have the authority to say what is certain or almost certain to succeed in this specific regard?
So I don't have any authority to do that. That's why I'm not on the granting committees for agricultural developments. That's why I'm not there. But the people who do, I was paraphrasing presumably what they would say.
Right, I
So
agree that that's
they
what they would
definitely do
say.
have the authority. Yeah.
I agree that they would say that, but the authority is the authority of their own specific ideological capture within their own institutions. That actually
So
is it's an impediment to real
look, so
science.
Chench,
So
are
these
you a
are
scientist?
two. Yes,
What field are you in, if I may ask?
an engineer.
You're not a scientist then.
Engineers aren't scientists.
No, there's a reason why STEM is STEM and not STEM.
What does STEM stand for?
Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Those are 4 different things.
What was the third word in that?
Is engineering,
acronym?
which is
Okay,
not
so
science. That's why they're 4 different things, right? Science
Oh,
is
I see
not
what
technology, is not engineering, is not mathematics.
okay, well, splitting hairs. I have technical expertise. right?
Okay. So, but the point is that generally any reasonably humble person recognizes that there are people who are much more well-informed on a particular topic than they are, and the people who are most likely to be well-informed on that particular topic are going to be the people who spent their lives studying that topic. So, if
You
we,
say that, but you also
I
immediately
mean, that's just like obviously true. That's just like
you just contradicted
obviously the
yourself.
case.
You
So,
literally just
so,
contradicted.
so I just contradicted myself? Really? How?
Yeah, you said, "Oh, yeah, we could trust that the people have the humility to understand that some people might know more than them, yada yada yada." And then when I brought up the Lysenko example, you
Yeah, no, that's my
completely
point. I
ignorantly
wasn't done.
dismissed it.
It may have sounded like I was contradicting myself. My point is it's not it would be irresponsible for me to say, so I have a PhD in physics, that's my area. It would be irresponsible of me to say, it is more likely that other people would know more about relativity than I would. I actually am an expert in that area. So it would be the humble thing to do, the responsible thing to do, the sound epistemological thing to do would be to appeal to experts in their field of expertise. So when we're talking about
Just an appeal to authority.
it's in a sense, yeah, which is this isn't
Yeah, I
a
know.
fallacious usage of an appeal to expertise. It's just not
I
fallacious.
mean,
It's not
I know
fallacious
you
reasoning,
think.
right? This
I
is
think
this is
you
sound
think.
epistemology.
I think that's what you think. But I think that it's an appeal to authority.
Look,
Fallacy.
Chanch, look. So this is a very simple question. What area of engineering are you in, if I can ask?
Mechanical.
Okay. So who is more likely to be right about let's say climate change? You or 100 climate scientists?
I don't know. I guess 100 climate scientists. I don't know. Depends who they're funded by.
That's a delusional claim. That
How
like
is it a
the
delusion?
uncertainty there is wild. Like obviously the people who spend their lives studying something are going to be well informed than you will.
Well,
That's like
they're
obviously the
studying
case.
it. The reason that they're studying is that they're enabled to do these studies based on funds which are granted by people who have opinions. I think that those opinions are referenced through the funding. I think that's the prevalent and most important question to ask. Who is funding what and for what purpose?
Fortunately, that information is available. In every single scientific paper, they will have an acknowledgement section, they will have a funding section, and they will tell you who is funding what.
Right, and the personal like Peter Thiel does a lot of funding. Do you happen to think that he has the interest of unleashing the creative potential of mankind in his funding, or do you think it's for his own private benefits or
So
his own kind of
generally,
nihilistic worldview?
So generally, when I'm reading science in my own field, I evaluate the scientific quality of the research without paying attention to the funding because I'm equipped to do that. When I'm reading science in another field, I generally believe the scientific consensus because that's epistemologically sound. If you think otherwise, then that's exactly what I mean by MAGA's anti-science. You think that it's
No, I'm
possible
saying
that
that
you could be more
you
well-informed than 100 climate scientists on something because of some enormous conspiracy. That's exactly what I mean.
I actually do give some. So what you're in this appeal to authority, you are rejecting the idea that the masses, so to speak, have any sort of contribution to the intellectual project of science writ large. You think that this should be codified within an institutional certification process, right?
Yeah, that everybody has
But that's
access
actually
to.
not.
Absolutely.
That's actually not how science historically has been developed. It is
Yeah,
actually a lot of
originally science was just done by rich people who had nothing better to do.
but it was also broadly experimented on by less rich people. It
It
was
absolutely
there
wasn't.
was more
It
more
absolutely
access
wasn't, by the way.
to
There's
to
far more access to like the poor and the economically disadvantaged now in science as a result of student loans, as a result of federal grants, than there was at any time in the past.
that may be true, but the range of possibilities for experimentation is much more narrow, and
No,
therefore the
it's far
possibility
broader. Like it's enormously
ju-
broader.
justify that.
Yeah, the amount of people who can conduct experiments is like in like 3 or 4 orders of magnitude larger.
Right,
So
right.
just
You're not,
statistically, the number of experiments that can be run is just a much wider class.
but the quality and type of experimentation is narrowed by the requirements of the grant funding process.
Again, not really. As somebody who has like gone through that whole process, the people who are funding the grants so the people who are in the field and know which things are valuable, right?
The
At
people
least
who
that's
fund the
how it
grants
should
are
be. It's not
in
always that.
in the field.
It's not always that way anymore. But
I know you're just refusing to admit that the undue influence of private wealth and finance capital in the institutions of science. I think that's where the distrust stems from.
well, but the thing is most funding that doesn't come from the universities themselves. Most funding comes from the government, right? That, or at least
Yeah,
that was the case 6 months
AKA
ago.
the people, AKA like normal people
Right,
that pay
right,
the taxes.
exactly. Because normal people, at least prior to 6 months ago, or maybe prior to 10 years ago or whatever, normal people recognize that yeah, there are things that we don't understand, but we trust that the people who do understand it are going to like use that additional understanding of the world around us to help us live better lives. That was like
So
a
who?
reasonable thing
So
to
who?
believe.
Okay, so in reality, who is
Hmm.
benefiting from this arrangement?
Who is
Mostly.
everybody? That's the whole business.
No, that's actually not true. It is the private institutions in
What private
pharmaceutical, in the
institutions? Most
military,
universities are public. Most grant funds were given by public institutions. Private
and
institutions are the minority here.
a lot of this publicly funded research actually becomes privatized when it matriculates
Oh, I agree.
into
I agree. We
the
shouldn't allow
yeah.
we shouldn't allow pharmaceutical companies to privatize the research of public universities. I agree. We shouldn't allow,
Yeah, it's also the
private
military-industrial
corporations
complex.
to
Raytheon,
privatize the
Lockheed
research of
Martin,
public universities. I agree.
the pipeline from the elite institutions and to places like pharmaceutical research and the
Yeah, I agree. We
military-industrial
should
complex
socialize it.
at large,
Absolutely. We should
is
nationalize
a
these companies.
it should be this should be
It
again
should be
this is
nationalized,
so
right?
because this relationship exists. I think
Hmm.
that is the reason for the kind of maybe knee-jerk or potentially reactionary
Yeah, so do we
mistrust of these
solve this
institutions.
by restricting scientific grants so that people rely on private grants more, restricting public
Well,
scientific
if you,
grants, or do we solve this by
it,
increasing public funding and making it
well,
easier to
no,
get public funding so that people rely on private funding less? This
we
is
solve
obvious.
it by no. Hold on. The actual solution is to nationalize the banks and land reform. That is like the how you
And
would
nationalize
solve
pharmaceutical
this issue.
companies.
If you nationalize the banks, the pharmaceutical companies would be state-owned enterprises, for example.
Socialism. I'm glad we're on board.
Communism specifically. We
Okay.
should operate under the Chinese model, essentially.
Okay, and you say you're MAGA?
I'm a Marxist-Leninist that supports them, yes.
So you're red fash,
No, I'm an Orthodox Marxist-Leninist.
but you support fascists.
No, I don't believe that they're fascists. I think that America already exists in fascism.
And so you
Has for a long
support tax cuts for the most wealthy.
Tax cuts has nothing to do with the relationship of the mode of production. It's actually its relationship to
It
finance capital, as
it
Jimmy
does,
Trump
but it does hurt the working class.
said. Yeah, I mean the America has been in a fascist mode of production since the post-war era,
Right,
since
and
the New
the
Deal.
mode of production and Trump's BBB, the Big Beautiful Bill, does that more, right? It pushes further in that direction, right?
It pushes in the direction that it is already the vector is already pointed to. The contradictions within the U.S.
So you're an
empire are coming to a
accelerationist?
close. No, I'm a Marxist-Leninist. I understand the contradictions at
So
hand.
why would you support a stronger push towards fascism?
It's not a stronger push towards fascism.
You just said it
We
was.
already exist. We already
Okay, fine.
exist
A push
in
towards stronger fascism.
It is simply the objective social phenomena of America. That is
Okay, so why would you
there's
support
nothing
more
anyone can do
fascism?
about it.
This is wild.
Because the contradictions will be exposed in that the
Okay, so you're an
failure
accelerationist.
what do you mean by accelerationist? I'm not
As
like
in
a
you want
nickname
things to get worse so
guy.
that people will do revolution and you'll end up with your
I
communist China.
I don't want things. I'm not a utopian idealist. I don't think that I can prescribe my want into the world. I think that the contradictions are already in motion, and this is simply a teleological necessity.
That's insufferable. God, Marxist-Leninists are so insufferable. It's a teleological necessity that we have more fascism. Like, oh, it's so insufferable. Paul Pierce, how's it going?
Oh, hey, how are you doing? I'm good.
I'm doing all right. Are you MAGA?
I guess so. Yeah, I voted for Trump. Yep.
Okay. Do you think that humans caused climate change?
Honestly, I didn't think so for a long time, and then I stumbled across Alex Jones, and I started hearing about cloud seeding and chemtrails and stuff, and I was like, kind of on the fence. But um, I
Cloud
would
seeding and
say
chemtrails
short
don't
answer
contribute to
is I
climate
don't
change, by
know.
the way. Okay. Do you think
Well,
that
what?
humans evolved from non-human primates?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Personally, I don't. But I don't think the people that I hang out with that also are would consider themselves mega. I think they believe in evolution, and
Okay.
so
Do you think that
yeah,
vaccines are generally safe and effective?
yeah, I do.
Okay. Do you think that neuroscientific research recognizes the distinction between sex and gender?
Um, I'll have to concede. I don't know.
Okay. So, would
I've
you?
heard that the DSM-5 has changed and stuff like that or whatever, but I don't know personally if that's I wouldn't be an authority on that at
Are
all.
you aware that the scientific consensus on all of these questions is yes?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Okay, so the scientific consensus is that humans cause climate change via CO2 emissions primarily. The scientific consensus is that humans evolved from non-human primates. The scientific consensus is that vaccines are safe and effective, and the scientific consensus is that there is a neurophysiological and sociological distinction between sex and gender. Um, so, do you think that generally MAGA's in agreement with the scientific consensus on these things, or do you think that generally they're against the scientific consensus on these things?
Well, obviously the things that you have described are points of contention for the right and the left, and I don't. I think the elected officials might give the impression, and also especially recent legislation might give um, everybody the thought that everybody on the MAGA side is thinking that way, but I'm not sure that we all do, which is why, um, and of all things, the Epstein files. Can we talk about that? The
No,
Epstein file.
it seems irrelevant, and B, it will probably get me banned on TikTok.
Oh, okay. Well, that stuff recently has come up, and a lot of people on our side are like, "What the heck?" And are probably going to start holding our administration accountable. Of all
Oh, that'd
things,
be
that's
wild.
that's
That'd be wild if that
right.
happened. It'd be
Yeah,
the first time
I
in
know.
10 years that any Republican held the MAGA administration accountable.
There's a bit of an uproar starting, and it kind of started with Candace Owens. So,
So, hey,
anyways,
I would bet you
yeah,
$5 that in 2 weeks nobody cares about this, or nobody on the right cares about this.
you might win. You might win that $5. But what I was I actually have. So I'm a normal guy. I'm not a scientist, or I'm not in. I don't. I make coffee for a living, and I run a convenience store. And but I do have some opinions on some of this stuff. Not that it matters too much, but I am kind of a normal guy, and I do believe that I need to have an opinion as a responsible adult on some of these things, which is why I thought it would be smart and worth the risk coming on here and talking to you about this.
Sure.
So my question, if you don't mind,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd love to ask you some questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So I believe this is more of a statement, and it's not a try to got you or whatever. But I believe so. I'm a Christian,
Mm-hmm.
and I do believe that the Bible is accurate and blah 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 blah, and all that kind of stuff. That puts me out of your, if I'm like not credible after that, I get it, whatever. But I believe motivation is 100% the focus of science. And what I mean by that is, I happen to know a lot of people that have gotten into the field of science, into the field of, which is in my mind is kind of similar into the medical field and things like that, because they experienced something that nobody could explain, whether it's a diagnosis or things like that, and they get into the field because no doctor or no person, whatever professional field it happened to be, they got into that field because somebody didn't fill that gap for them. And I feel like that's, at least for me, I've seen a lot of people get into fields of study like STEM, and even science, where we're trying to figure out how is this happening, why is this happening, traditional theories that still exist today, and it's the best, whatever it is, don't explain this the best way, in my opinion. So I'm going to get into this field and I'm going to, challenge it, and it's now my life's mission to do that. That's what I see these people doing, and I think that's awesome, and I think that's how we produce better results in some ways. Anyway, all that being said, part of the reason why I'm super kind of excited to talk to you is because I have seen that there have been giant cuts in the scientific field as far as government funding goes anyway, like NASA and things like that.
Yeah.
And long story short, I have some questions after this, but I had a dream a long time ago as a kid that I would someday help create a something that today's science and technology, and your field in particular, says is not possible, but a super high efficiency electromagnetic engine that uses mechanical force primarily
what's the question?
Run.
What's the question?
So my question to you is, what would you like people to know if the Trump administration is against science, especially traditional thought? Because motivation is 100%.
My goal here is not to even make any prescriptive claims about, it's bad that Trump is defunding science. That's not even like, I happen to think that's true, but that's not even my goal. My goal here is to inform people that if you're MAGA, if you're voting with MAGA, you're voting for the anti-science party. And so if you care about science, you are living a contradiction. If you care about scientific improvements, if you care about scientific development, if you care about the scientific supremacy of the United States, MAGA is not the party for you. That's the goal here. Now, that's not everybody. Some people don't care, in which case they'll just agree MAGA is anti-science, and then we don't have anything to talk about. But that is my goal, because it's evidently the case just from the scientific cuts that we've been experiencing in the last 5 months.
Can I interject a question off of that?
Sure.
So, and I'm not trying to prove you wrong. I'm just curious your line of thought, and I get what you just said totally. Okay, so do you believe that the current administration, besides the recent cuts, which are significant, do you believe that there was a much better administration for whether it be your particular field of science, or how many years back do we have to go to find an administration that is preferable?
So prior to 7 months ago, scientific funding wasn't at risk. Universities weren't scrambling to try to find funds for their grad students. People weren't worried that their grants were going to be cut mid-experiment, so they'd have to shut down their labs. Yes, prior to 7 months ago, under the Biden administration, you can criticize the Biden administration if you want, but just objectively speaking, scientific institutions and the scientific endeavor, the scientific community, these were all much more comfortable. They were able to do their jobs. They were able to do their jobs efficiently, and they weren't worried about fleeing to another country so that they could keep doing their science.
Okay. So back to my original statement, personally, I believe that the motivation is 100% the focus of science. And also an administration,
the motivation is
whether
the
it's
focus of science.
Yeah, I might have that backwards now I'm thinking about it. But the maybe it's the focus of science is whatever the motivation is. Maybe that's better. But currently, like, the administration is not focused on funding science, and
so they're
that's what I
anti-science.
see. And
Yeah, they're
and
anti-science.
and because of that, I think maybe you're right. The traditional sense of like how much funding science gets and all of this stuff. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's not wanting to do that. Maybe it's just wanting to figure out ways. Well, why I one of the reasons why I voted for MAGA is because I thought we were going to be saving money, and with the big beautiful bill, what it's going to cost money, a lot of money.
Yep.
It's going to
And
add money to our deficit.
it's costing money, and they're cutting science funding. Like cutting
Yep.
the science funding didn't help save money because yeah, the deficit's getting bigger. I agree, which proves that it's not they weren't cutting science to save money. That's the evidence, because if they were trying to save money, they wouldn't have increased the deficit. You're cutting science for some other reason, and I'll leave it up to you to figure out what that might be.
Right. So there has to be
Yeah,
I
the
know
reason is
just
obvious,
from
and
previous.
Trump said it 10 years ago.
Mhm.
I'm paraphrasing now, but he loves stupid people.
Hmm.
He said that.
Okay. When did he say that?
Let me find the quote. Okay, I was mischaracterizing it slightly. He said instead, "I love the poorly educated." That was
I love the
that was after
poorly
Trump won Nevada in 2016.
What was the context of him saying that? I wonder.
He was talking about all the groups of people that he loves. He says, "We won with the young, we won with the old, we won with highly educated, we won with poorly educated." And then he says, "I love the poorly educated."
Could it be that he said that because the highly educated people he might think are stuck up or something?
Maybe. So that's why he loves the poorly educated people.
Hmm.
And to
I
be clear, this isn't like this. That it's probably not because highly educated people are stuck up. It's because, and this is a quote from The Atlantic, which was reported in March of that year. Quote: "The best single predictor of Trump support in the Republican primary is the absence of a college degree." That's the best single predictor. If you were a Trump supporter during the 2016 primary.
Honestly, that's probably true. I wish that I'm not college educated. I started to be. I tried to. I just was not motivated, unfortunately. And the thing is, could I have gone somewhere with it? Maybe way later on, but that's in a different universe, right? But
Look,
I can see why a lot of people that are hardworking, that not that scientists or highly educated people are not hardworking. I'm just saying people that have to learn the hard way are typically not college educated, and they also are some of the hardest working people out there, I would say.
I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with not having like a college degree. What I'm saying
No,
is
yeah,
that
yeah.
Trump knows that his biggest voting bloc are people who are not college educated, right? And so
Right.
and the best way to make that number go up, to make the number of people who are not college educated go up, is to cut scientific funding, cut funding at universities, threaten universities that they'll have all their funding cut.
Create uneducated people.
Right, and if you create uneducated people, you have people who will support his party. Like it's pretty evident, at least to me.
This is the step that I can't personally make, and I see there's some people in the comments that are saying things like Paul got duped and stuff. Maybe that's
Don't
true.
read the comments.
I'm willing to admit
they'll be mean. Don't read the comments.
It's okay. But I'm just, like I said, I'm just a normal guy. I have a normal situation going on, and I'm not claiming to be super knowledgeable about really anything. I can make a good cup of coffee though.
Look, I'll tell you one thing.
So
if there's one thing that scientists need more than grant funding, it's a good cup of coffee. So I'm not gonna. I can't be mad at you, right?
I have conversations with so many people. I used to smoke cigarettes, and I worked for a big coffee chain a long time ago, and I used to sit out on the patio during my 10-minute break and have a cup of coffee, and it's amazing how many normal people, or what I would view as normal people, are superhero people. And what I mean by that is, like, I met a guy that has fully redesigned the conventional gasoline engine to produce way more power than any other engine out there. For example, like a 4-cylinder engine produces 400 horsepower naturally aspirated, for example, just by changing some of the internal designs. And you probably know about this actually, but on the the internal design of the engine by tweaking it a bit, and you were talking about, since this is a science topic. I know this is a little bit off topic, but rabbit hole with me for just a
Well,
second.
don't go. Hold on. I
will-
do want to say. Stay super linear. So I'd
Sure,
rather
sure,
not go
sure.
down a rabbit hole.
Okay, sure. I was just going to say, I met all different kinds of people. We're talking about educated, non-educated. These are people that didn't go to college, but ended up learning how to do amazing things, and maybe they don't get recognized for it for a long, long time. But
No,
I know people that have
I agree.
invented things and things like that, and
Look,
you know,
I'm not saying
I live in
that being
Texas, and there's
I'm not saying that being highly educated is like a necessary prerequisite for like significantly impacting the world. Like, surely we can
Sure.
agree on that. There have been I think it's probably fair to say that most of the founding fathers were like they were doing their things by the time they were in their early 20s.
Oh,
Not a whole lot of time,
farmers.
right? They were
Yep.
they were farmers. So look, nobody's saying that. What I'm saying is that there is a degree of animosity that the Republican Party and MAGA in particular has towards scientific institutions and has towards institutions of higher learning. And
especially recently, yes.
Yeah, especially recently. And look, if you think that's a good thing or if you think that's a bad thing, that's up to you. All I'm saying is that that's absolutely true, and saying otherwise is
I
just
think it's
lying.
shameful. Yeah.
But Paul, I'm
there's
gonna let you go.
Definitely. Go ahead. Oh yeah.
I'm gonna let you go.
There's other people. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who have been waiting. So thank you so much for being here. And if I'm ever in the area, what area of the world are you in, if you don't mind me asking?
Dallas, Texas.
If I'm ever in Dallas, I'll make sure to hit you up and see if I can grab a cup of coffee, okay?
Sick. Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, have a good one. All right, I have some super chats to read, and then I'll bring up a guest from YouTube. So we have, I missed a lot of super chats, or rather, I skipped them because I forgot. So we have from Tim for Pele with the $10. I'm not in any way MAGA, but is the graphic behind you a bit over the top? Seems like it doesn't help the cause. It is a bit over the top. That's kind of the goal. The goal is to be provocative here because A, it is how I feel. B, you got to be provocative, right? From Garba Gaiman with the 10 Canuck bucks. That would be, quote, that would be an increase of infinity, unquote. Quote, okay, so you would say about 20%? I would agree, yeah. So math is hard, turns out. From Woolite Mammoth with the $5, MAGA trying to prove they're not anti-science. Quote, no, I'm not anti-science, it's just that all of modern science is wrong. Yeah, that's exactly the point. MLs are the worst kind of people. Okay, they're not the worst kind of people, but they tend to be not much better than the worst kind of people. All right, let's talk to Meow. Meow, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Are you MAGA?
Yes.
Okay, and would you say that you are pro-science?
I would say that I am pro-science, yeah.
Okay, and just a few questions, just so we got to get this out of the way. First, do you think that humans caused climate change?
I think humans have an impact on our climate, if that's what you mean, but I don't agree with the mainstream narrative of climate change, no.
So I can be more specific, and then I can hopefully then you can give me a yes or no. Do you think that human emissions of greenhouse gases is the largest contributing factor to the current climate change that we're experiencing?
To the current climate change, I mean, I would say humans have a large impact on the planet, absolutely. So I guess that would be agreeing with that statement.
Okay. Would you say that humans descend from non-human primates?
Humans descend from non-human primates. That's an interesting one. So in my personal belief, I believe that aliens and extraterrestrials were involved with that evolution, but a part of it, yeah.
Okay. Would you say that vaccines are generally safe and effective?
I would say that's a pretty bold statement because there's a lot of vaccine trials that don't end up in being like mainstream. So some vaccines tested, tried, proven, absolutely, but not all vaccines.
I said generally. For what it's worth, I said
care.
generally.
I'm just saying that's a bold statement because what you're inferring is
it was a question. I'm saying, are vaccines generally safe and effective?
No, I would say the majority of vaccines probably get smothered before they ever make it like mainstream.
Okay, I can rephrase just to be more specific. Do you think that the majority of vaccines that are currently administered to young people and old people, do you think that those vaccines are generally safe and effective?
Generally safe and effective. I don't know. I'm on the fence. I think it's kind of a personal situation there. You know, well, some people might not. I personally don't use vaccines and did not give any to my kids.
Okay. And do you think that the neuroscientific consensus, the sociological consensus, is that sex and gender are distinguishable traits?
I think those are just word semantics. I think at the end of the day, we have XX and XY, and that's it. I mean, there might be some like really rare chromosomal genetics that are out there, but not with the social
That
fat
wasn't
that
my
we've seen
question.
with.
Do you think that they are distinct categories, I should say?
I guess it depends on what you're trying to allude to, because yeah, again,
That
if
there
we're
is a
talking
that
about
there
the
is that
difference between a
sex and
man and a
gender
woman on a
are useful and
scientific
distinct
level,
categories. That's what I'm asking.
I think that when you're born, you're determined whether you are XY or XX based off your
Is that a yes or is that
genetics.
a no?
I'm not answering your question in the way you want me to, because you're trying to back
Well,
me up against
it's a
the
yes or
wall
no.
for your debate.
I'm
Listen, the
genuinely
reason I'm
not.
here is
I'm
to
just
talk
trying to
about
get your
the lab
views.
leak. That's really my
I'm
point of view
I'm
here today, is to
generally
talk about the
just
lab leak.
interested in I just wanted to establish what your views are. It sounds like your answer is no.
Okay.
You don't think there's a valuable distinction between sex and gender that can be made.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there is a distinct difference between XX and XY.
That's unrelated to the question.
Do you agree or do you disagree?
I agree. It's also unrelated to the question.
I don't think it is. I think that
Yes, my question is there a valuable distinction to be made between?
I'd
In my
really like to talk about the lab.
I'm not going to let you off this until you can answer the question, because
I did answer your question.
well, I thought you answered my question, and then I rephrased what I thought your answer was, and you said no, that wasn't what I was saying. So now I need your answer. Do you think that there's a valuable distinction to be made between sex and gender?
If you're talking about personality and genetics, then yeah, there's a difference. Like some people have a personality
I'm not
that
talking
would
about
be
personality and
different
genetics.
than their genetics. So if your genetics are one, but you grow up and your personality is that you believe that you are a woman.
I'm
or
talking
a man,
about
opposite.
Psychological, neurobiological, sociological.
Okay, no, we're talking about
distinctions.
science. That's the point. MAGA and science.
Yeah.
So I'm here to talk about it with you. So let's not don't try to back me up into a
Look,
corner.
you still haven't answered the question.
Let me. Oh, I'm explaining my explanation to you.
So okay, so to be clear,
a person is born with XY.
Do you think that there is a? Do you think that it is possible for somebody to be born with XX and to be a man?
And be a man?
Yes.
Genetically, no.
That wasn't my question. And be a man.
Genetically, no.
That wasn't my question. I'm not asking genetically,
or based off their personality and what they take on, their social role. Are you talking
I'm talking about their neurophysiological, psychological, and sociological features.
Sociological features. That's what I'm saying. So you're talking about social roles, or are we
psychological,
talking
neurophysiological, and social features?
Okay. Well, I think
not genetic features. I'm not referring to genetics.
So you're not talking about genetics. So you're saying,
no. I'm asking, can somebody have XX chromosomes?
If you have an X, if you
have XX chromosomes.
Okay. I'm following you.
And then be neurophysiologically, sociologically, and or psychologically a man.
You can socially be, but not genetically.
Okay. The genetic piece is a red herring and unrelated to my question.
We're talking about science. Genetics is related
genetics
to science.
Is yes. So is psychology. So is sociology. So is neurophysiology.
Okay, but
so I'm asking,
are you understanding my perspective?
Your perspective is that you don't think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, you think that a man is somebody who has XY chromosomes. And maybe some other features as well. Okay. So you disagree that there is a useful categorical distinction.
Depending on if you're combining everything, sociological, but I'm talking about genetically.
Okay. So you think that there is no value in distinguishing features that are not genetic?
No, you just I never said that. You said that.
You keep bringing up genetics. I'm bringing up the whole category of people.
I'm MAGA, and this is what you don't understand about MAGA, is a lot of us don't have a problem with gay people or with trans people. A lot of that.
Right. You don't have a problem with trans people.
Not in your private life. No, I don't ask people who they have
sex
with.
But you won't. Trans people has nothing to do with who people have sex with.
Well, it just depends.
No, trans people, being trans has nothing to do with who you have sex
Okay,
with.
you got me on the wording there, but you saw my point. You see my point.
Well, but
right?
look,
Like, I
look.
just
The
think
point
that
is, if do you think that being a man means you have XY chromosomes?
being a man genetically means you have XY
That wasn't my. I
chromosomes.
didn't say
Not
be. I
socially,
didn't
not
say
socially.
genetically. I didn't say genetically. I
well,
just said being a man.
You're trying to make inferences, and you're trying to corner me into.
Do you think
into a
that
corner, so
there's a
I'm being more
difference between
specific
being
with
a
my
man
words.
genetically and being a man neurophysiologically?
Yeah, I guess you could make that argument.
Okay. So someone could be a man neurophysiologically and
These are
be
just words.
female.
See, these are just
Please.
words that we use to describe
So
things.
somebody could be a man neurophysiologically and be female genetically. Do you believe that that's true?
I don't know what neurophysiologically is defined exactly.
It's essentially the arrangement of the brain structures.
The arrangement of the brain structures. Well, our brain structures get rearranged over time based off of our experiences.
Okay, so that's irrelevant to my question.
No, that's
Can
not,
somebody
though.
be a man
It's
neurophysiologically
nature versus nurture.
but be female genetically?
Can somebody be born on day one, the day they come out of their womb, with XY and be a woman? I'm asking you.
Well, generally a woman is somebody who's an adult.
Be a female. Is that better?
So can somebody be born with XY and be a female? No.
So exactly. So this is a nature versus nurture thing.
No, you're just confusing sex and gender, which I guess answers my question.
No, I'm explaining it in a way. I'm trying to help you understand that you're trying to throw a blanket over the whole subject. And I'm trying to say, let's be very specific here. When an XY is born and comes out of the womb before there's any nurture, we're just talking nature, then yes, that is genetically and scientifically a boy or a man or however
it's a
you want
male.
to say
The word you're looking for is male.
That's fine. You can say whatever word you want. You get my point.
Now, the word that we use for describing things like neurophysiological arrangements, the way that we describe things like psychological experiences, and the way that we describe things like sociological descriptions, the word that we use for those kinds of features are boy, girl, man, woman. The words that we use for XY, XX, having testes or having ovaries, that is male, female. We use different words to describe different features.
Semantics. This is just word semantics. Are you trying to?
Well,
listen,
no.
I
We
came
use
here
different words
specifically
to
to
make
talk to you
we
about
use
the
different
lab
words
leak
to
theory.
make distinctions. We use
I
words
came
to make
here very
distinctions, and it doesn't seem like that you think that there's these distinctions.
No, I've already explained my point on that subject. I'm here to talk about the lab leak theory. Would you like to
Okay,
talk about
so
the
does
lab
this have
leak?
anything to do with science?
The lab leak theory is absolutely everything to do with science.
What does it have to do with science?
A virus, right? It just spread across the whole world and killed over 7 million people.
Yeah, but what does that have to do? What does the lab leak theory have to do with science?
Okay, well, some people believe that the virus spontaneously erupted from.
To be clear, are these scientists that have this position?
Yeah, this is the mainstream narrative.
The mainstream narrative of scientists?
That the virus evolved through animals and then mysteriously jumped to humans.
That this is the mainstream narrative amongst scientists?
This is the mainstream narrative amongst American scientists.
Okay. Do you have evidence to support that?
What do you mean? You've never heard of the pandemic?
I'm aware that I'm aware that COVID exists. I'm asking for your evidence that the mainstream scientific consensus is that that the virus evolved, jumped from an animal specimen to a human specimen.
Yeah, that is the mainstream narrative.
So is there a source for that?
Do you have ChatGPT in front of you? Just ChatGPT.
I'm not using ChatGPT for sources.
Yes, that is absolutely. If you want to fact check me, go ahead. That is absolutely the mainstream scientific narrative, and that's what the mainstream scientific narrative was less than a month after this hit the news.
Okay, so now question:
less than 1 month,
is that still the mainstream scientific? Is that still the mainstream scientific consensus?
It still is in America.
America's not the only place in the world.
Yeah, no, it's not the mainstream consensus in China or Russia or other places. No.
Where else?
It's not. I mean, a lot of people take the American consensus as their own. So if you ask, like,
well, no, where else? Sorry, you said China and Russia. Where else? Because if you're just citing China and Russia,
India I believe India supports the mainstream American narrative.
Okay.
So if you look at some of the major countries, that there is some dissent there, but the reality of it is that we're talking about science. So science, right?
We are talking
Where
about
you
science, yeah.
study and you
Yep.
research and you
And then we
form a
come to
hypothesis
a
and you test
conclusion.
it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Okay.
Yep.
So when the lab leak theory originated, explain to me what scientific process the mainstream scientific community used to determine that the lab leak theory was wrong less than a month, literally a week after this hit the news. It was
I don't know what time period you're talking about.
Fauci and what was it, like 50 or 60 other mainstream scientific journals, articles, everything. They all came out and they had the same explanation that
50 mainstream scientific journals came out.
Are you denying that
I
Fauci
didn't.
said
I
this
didn't.
come from
So I believe you if you said that Fauci said that. But I don't rely on Fauci for scientific consensus.
Well, a lot of people in our country do because
okay, well, but that's irrelevant. People can appeal to the wrong authority, and
so let's talk about it.
That's unfortunate, but it has nothing to do with what the scientific consensus
let's talk
is.
about this from a scientific perspective for me, please.
Right.
Because
so
this is
just
the
to be
most
clear,
important
meow,
scientific topic.
meow. So I just want to establish something, just like some ground rule here. So so you believe that there is a scientific consensus that that COVID originated in a natural way, or perhaps like it jumped from an animal to a human. That's your belief that is what the scientific consensus is. Now
that's not my belief. That's
no, but that's right. Was. I said you believe that that's what the scientific consensus is, right?
That's fair. Okay.
Okay. Yep. And do you disagree with that scientific consensus?
I do. Yep.
Okay. Now, who's more likely to be well informed on viral evolution, on epidemiology, on virology? You or like 10,000 scientists who study that in their field?
I have a similar question.
I will answer your question after you answer mine.
Okay. Well, I'm not saying me. I'm not saying my philosophy is the right philosophy. If that's what you think. I'm not citing myself saying, well, I discovered that this. So when you use logic and you use facts, you can put together your own opinion. Everybody has an opinion, right? So that's my opinion. But the fact of the matter is that we have a mainstream narrative that hit the mainstream news, right? And that came from Fauci, and that came from his group of scientists that were funded through him. And they determined behind the scenes, through their emails, all that we were going to discredit the lab leak theory. We weren't going to scientifically test the hypothesis. We were going to discredit in the news immediately.
So then this has nothing to do with science. So there isn't a scientific. There is no science. So now you're changing your tune. Now it sounds like you're saying there is no scientific consensus that that the lab leak theory is false.
The scientific people who were supposed to have a scientific consensus had an alternative agenda.
Okay, so then this has nothing to do with science. This has nothing to do with science, even if you're right. No, it really doesn't.
Lab leak theory, and you asked me if that's what I believe.
Well, no.
So go ahead and ask me the next question. Why?
Here's the point. No, I actually don't care why you believe it. The point is that you've flip-flopped from saying that it was the scientific consensus, that the scientists had come to a scientific consensus that the lab leak theory was false.
Consensus. They came to a consensus.
Oh, okay. Then I don't care. It seems irrelevant. It doesn't have anything to do with science.
Okay, well, let's go to the lab leak. Let's tell me
why. If it doesn't have anything to do with science, why do I care?
You're dodging this subject hardcore, dude.
Well, if it doesn't have anything to do with science, I don't care.
You don't want to talk about the fear and cleavage site or the grants and the
look. If it doesn't have anything to do with the scientific consensus or like any sort of scientific studies, I just don't care.
That has everything.
It's off
to do
topic.
with science.
Listen, it doesn't. Apparently, it doesn't.
No American scientists were let into China to do any studies. Especially not back at the
time.
Wait,
I'm pretty sure there were American scientists that worked there, but that's neither here nor there. I mean, look, if you're saying that there was no scientific consensus, then you're just saying that, yeah, there was no scientific consensus and the scientific consensus wasn't wrong.
Do you want to talk about the codons and
no, I really don't care about it, to be honest.
So you don't care about the lab leak that killed 7 million people.
Well,
look,
my position is that if there is a scientific consensus on the matter that I'm not like an expert in, I'll just trust what the scientific consensus is.
Okay.
That's my position. Do you share that? Do you share that position?
That is not scientific.
Sorry. Do you share that position or no? Do you share that position?
Do I share what position?
The position that I hold.
No, not
okay. Do you think that MAGA shares that position?
They have an agenda.
Do you think that MAGA shares that position?
Do you think like when you go to a university,
please,
that they have an agenda?
Do you think that MAGA shares that position?
I don't know. No, because there's a lot of people in MAGA who don't know their foot from their ass when it comes to science, or when it comes to a lot of topics like economics, or when it comes to other things. So no, you can't take every person because they're MAGA.
Do you think
You
that
can't say
generally
that
MAGA shares that
every-
position?
I think generally MAGA shares the position that a lab leak theory.
That wasn't my question. That wasn't my question.
What's your question? Be
My
specific.
question is do you think that, so my position is that if I'm not an expert on a subject and I want to form an opinion on a subject, I appeal to the scientific consensus. Do you think that that is a methodology that MAGA generally also uses?
On which topic?
Any topic.
No, because if you're appealing to
then we agree.
if you're
MAGA's
appealing to
anti-science.
No, listen. If you're appealing to an authority that has an agenda, then you have to take that agenda into consideration, right? So if my kid asks me, Dad, can I buy something? I have an agenda to save money that day. Maybe I'll say no. Or if I have plenty of money and I want to spoil him for his birthday, maybe I'll say yes. I have an agenda. If you go to a college and you don't understand that that particular university has an agenda outside of just teaching you something, then you're missing the point. The point of these scientists making their scientific discoveries less than a week after it hit the news, that it wasn't from a lab leak.
This has nothing to do with the scientific consensus. So you have a bunch of people, a bunch of politicians who are making claims.
No, Fauci.
But if it's not backed by a scientific consensus, I don't care.
It was absolutely backed.
Okay, so now you're saying that there was a scientific consensus.
I've said that from the beginning.
Well, no, you said that first, and then you said that there wasn't a scientific consensus, and now you're saying that there is one again.
Not formulated through the scientific process.
That's what a scientific consensus is.
Then they did not have a scientific
Okay, then I don't care.
to make that.
Then it's irrelevant.
It's irrelevant. So what's irrelevant? That this virus.
It has nothing to do with the topic.
Okay, answer me this question. Was there a level 4 biowarfare lab in Wuhan that was using gain-of-function research there?
Maybe, but it's irrelevant to the topic.
So you don't want to talk about the lab leak. Is that what you're saying?
Well, if it's irrelevant to the question
science,
of MAGA's approach to science, then I don't care. It's not relevant to the subject. Learn to be on topic.
It is relevant. It's irrelevant to the world. Your subject, the base subject.
Maybe
of this
look.
conversation
If
support science.
if the topic
scientific research.
If the topic
let's talk
was
about the codons. Let's
look.
Talk about
So meow. If the topic was MAGA is wrong about COVID, then maybe you'd have a point. But that's not the topic.
Okay, my point is that the left-wing institutionalized scientists made a consensus and they went public with it.
Was it a scientific consensus, or was it just a bunch of people agreeing on something?
They portrayed it as a scientific consensus.
Okay, maybe they did.
It wasn't.
Maybe they did.
Maybe we can agree that they didn't actually do the research to go to the lab or understand how this might have. Now, listen to me a second.
You just cut yourself off. That was wild.
I will cut myself off. My brain works that way. In October
we
of
grant
2019, the Bill Gates Foundation had a meeting in New York to conduct a simulation of what would happen if a virus escaped.
Wait, just to be clear, does this have anything to do with the scientific consensus or scientific studies?
It does, absolutely.
Okay, what does it have to do? What does Bill Gates have to do with that?
So in October of 2019, they ran a simulation in New York about what would happen if a virus escaped.
Who's
from
they?
China.
Were they scientists?
Well, I mean, you want me to look it up real quick? I'll
Yeah.
Chat GPT it. New York simulation.
Dems are anti-science. You've been waiting for a while. I know that you disconnected, so I picked you first. So how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing okay.
Cool. Okay, so are you MAGA?
I am Canadian, so I'm not able to choose really.
Oh, okay. Well, do you think that MAGA is pro-science?
I think that MAGA is more pro-science than the Democrats are. I do agree that neither political party is that great about science. But
okay, then we agree.
The Dems are definitely worse.
We agree that MAGA is anti-science. The topic's not about the Dems.
I mean, I've heard you say multiple times that if you're voting for MAGA, you're voting for the party of anti-science. So if the Dems are more anti-science,
well, that's
than
absolutely
MAGA,
true.
That wouldn't be true.
So, well,
like
no.
Voting for MAGA would be the pro-science party if they're less anti-science than the Dems.
It's possible that there could be two anti-science parties. That's logically possible, right?
Well, but you only have two options, don't you? It's not like there's.
Well,
a
you
third
could also
option to
not
vote
vote,
for.
or you could vote third party.
If if you're voting in the American electoral system, you vote for the lesser of the two evils.
Sometimes, not everybody. And what I'm saying
That's
is, if
how
you
you
care about
vote.
science,
Don't
saying,
pretend that's not how the first past the post system works. That's how
that is
first
the
past the
outcome.
post
But
works.
plenty of people don't vote, or they vote for a third party because they don't like either of the two main parties. Now, the claim is that MAGA is anti-science. Do you think that claim is false?
I think that of the two political parties, MAGA is far more pro-science than the Dems.
Can you give examples of MAGA being pro-science?
Okay, for example, on climate change, I'd say that MAGA is far more honest about their opinions on climate change, and they interact with the scientific community in a way that reflects their opinions on climate change, rather than the Dems, who don't think that climate change is real, but keep paying lip service to the scientists and pretend as though climate change is real, despite the fact that...
I'm confused. Sorry? So I'm confused. You said that I asked you what topics they're pro-science on, and you said that they're just honest about their opinions on climate change. But that doesn't mean that their opinions are pro-science. So I'm curious, what topic is MAGA pro-science on?
Well, like I said, neither party is all that pro-science.
Okay, so...
but the Dems are significantly worse.
I mean, you may feel that way, but the point is can you give me any single example of MAGA being pro-science? Otherwise, we just agree that MAGA is anti-science.
On climate change, MAGA has a more honestly scientific opinion than the Dems do.
When you say honestly scientific opinion, I don't know what you mean by that. Can you elaborate?
MAGA says, we're politicians, we aren't going to listen to the scientists about climate change, we're making economic decisions, and we're disregarding the science on this.
Yeah, okay, so they're anti-science.
No, they're regarding the science, they're acknowledging that it exists, and they're saying, we don't care, we're going to make an economic decision.
No, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. So that's where you're mistaken. That's where you're mistaken. They actually don't acknowledge, at least many of them, don't acknowledge that the science exists. They think that the science is false.
I mean, who are you referring to when you say MAGA? Are you referring to, like, the MAGA supporters or the MAGA politicians?
Both. Trump called climate change a hoax, for example. So, like, that's just an example of, like, the MAGA guy, the king of MAGA, if you will.
I don't trust politicians on anything that they say. I trust them on the policies that they pass.
Right, but the point is...
I don't believe any word that comes out of a politician.
Okay, so the policies that they're passing are clearly not motivated by well-informed understanding of what will happen as a result of climate change. They're clearly not well-informed on the science.
Democratic policies? Do you think democratic policies are well supported in regards of what is happening in regards to climate change?
It's irrelevant for the conversation. The conversation is about MAGA.
It is very relevant to the conversation. If you're saying MAGA is the party of anti-science, that means that they need to be worse
actually,
than
that's
the
not what the background.
There are two options.
That's actually not what the background says. The background does not say MAGA is the party of anti-science. It says MAGA is anti-science.
That's a thing that you've said. I've counted since I've been listening. You said that 4 times so far. That if you voted for MAGA, you voted for the party of anti-science.
Well, okay,
that is a thing that you have said
that's
4
actually
times
fair.
since I've been listening to the stream.
That's actually fair. I definitely did say that. They are the party of anti-science because they reject the scientific conclusions significantly more frequently than the Dems do. That's absolutely true. You will never hear a highfalutin or a powerful MAGA politician saying humans are the major cause of climate change and the outcomes of climate change will negatively impact all Americans. You will never hear a MAGA politician saying that, despite that being the scientific consensus.
I don't care what. Yeah, but I don't care what politicians say. I care what they do.
Okay, well, you'll never see a MAGA politician making policy that reflects that information.
You will never see a Democratic politician making policy that reflects that information.
I mean, you will, but again, the point still stands is that a MAGA will never do that.
Study to form a task group to make an opinion that then they can't ignore, while the MAGA just turns around and says, "No, we're ignoring you from the get-go. We're not going to do this dumb charade where we
just to be clear,
through 8 hoops and then ignore you."
Just to be clear, one of the major ways that we can, one of the major agreements amongst climate scientists is that one of the ways that we can help solve or help fix or help alleviate the climate change catastrophe that we're facing is by focusing on green energy production. Generally speaking, Democrats love green energy production, Like lots of funding is offered towards green energy production, solar, wind, geothermal, hydroelectric, etc.
Really?
And like just strictly speaking, yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
So just strictly speaking, like Democrats tend to be more in favor of green energy production than Republicans do. Surely we can agree on that.
I mean, under Obama, like as recently as under Obama, which is like
10 years ago.
made America the #1 exporter of oil and gas in the world.
Sure. Now, did Obama?
He did not fund green energy production
So
to any
to be
significant
clear,
degree.
under Obama, there were tax cuts or tax rebates for solar panels in your homes.
Oh yeah, because everyone agrees that putting solar panels on top of the homes is actually if you talk to any scientist, they'll tell you that's not an effective way to implement solar energy.
Solar energy
Right?
is an effective way of reducing climate.
That's what I'm talking about. Is the Dems pay lip
actually it
service
is.
and don't actually implement effective policies.
But actually it is. I mean, like any solar panels is better than no solar panels. I think we agree on that. I mean, but like anyway, this is sort of off topic because you can just take a poll of either Republican or MAGA politicians or MAGA voters, and what you'll find is that MAGA voters are significantly less likely to believe that humans cause climate change than Democratic voters are. Like that's just statistically true.
I mean, I'd agree with that. That MAGA voters are sure.
Okay, MAGA voters are
to believe in climate change,
right?
But I thought we were talking about MAGA politicians and not the voters.
We were talking about MAGA in general.
Okay.
So do you think that?
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot more diversity of thought on the right than there is on the left. So like, you'd expect that.
So that would be like saying there's a lot more diversity of thought about whether 2 + 2 = 4 on the right than on the left. I mean, yeah, there is. That doesn't mean that diversity of thought is good.
Yeah, I never said the diversity of thought was good. I just said that it's expected. You know, you have a lot more diversity of thought. Like,
well, actually, I don't even know if that's true. By the way, that there's more diversity of thought on the right. I actually don't think that that's true. The diversity
I can link to you a study that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. Paste it in the chat.
When you consider the fact that Dems agree on like most things and MAGA voters can't agree on the shape of the Earth, like obviously there's more diversity of thought on the right.
So you said you would link me a study?
Yeah. I mean, you're gonna have to give me a couple seconds.
Yeah, you can paste it into the chat. Go ahead.
Diversity of thought on the right is greater than that on the left. Yeah, if you'd like, just type that in.
Well, I typed in diversity of thought amongst Democrats versus Republicans rather than typing in diversity of thought is greater on the right than on the left. And we can just look at, I guess we can just, okay, so that's Pew Research for ideological gap, but that's not super relevant. Political polarization. So what I did find is that American partisans vastly underestimate the diversity of other partisans' policy attitudes. I found a study on that, but...
I'm sorry, I'm just verifying that I'm human to get into this webpage
sure.
to make sure that it's the thing that I'm talking about.
Okay, so...
Yeah, here, BP Sci-Hub. Here it is, copy this link. Chat.
There's a chat window in the... Not into the YouTube chat, by the way, into the chat in the app that you're talking to me on? Yeah, okay.
As the study, there's way more diversity of thought on the right than the left. Like, of course, you'd expect to see more diverse opinions on the right than the left.
Okay, attitude networks as intergroup realities, using network modeling to research attitude-identity relations in polarizing political contexts. Let's read the abstract. So, we apply a newly developed attitude network modeling technique, response item network, to study attitude-identity relationships in the context of hot-button issues that polarize the current U.S. American electorate. The properties of the network method allow us to simultaneously depict differences in the structural organization of attitudes between groups and to explore the relevance of organized attitude systems for group identity management. Individuals based on a sample of U.S. American crowd workers in the representative 2020 ANES dataset, we modeled the attitude network with two conflictive partisan belief systems. In the first step, we demonstrate that the structural properties of the attitude network provide substantial information about latent partisan identities, thereby revealing which attitudes belong to which specific groups. In the second step, we evaluate the potential of attitudes to communicate identity-relevant information. Results from a vignette study suggest that people rely on their mental representations of attitude identity links to structure and evaluate their social environment. By highlighting functional interdependencies between macro-level attitude structures and identity management. The presented findings help advance the understanding of attitude, identity, dynamics, and socio-political cleavages. This says nothing about the right being more ideologically diverse than the left. Did you pull this from ChatGPT?
What?
Did you pull this from AI?
What'd you say?
This source?
No, I mean, I pulled it off of. I will be honest. I just pulled the source from like a tabloid that was talking about it.
Okay, because the abstract says nothing about that. Nothing about the right wing being more diverse, more like ideologically diverse than the left. So, great example of not being interested in like actual science.
Scroll down to the results. Scroll down to the results, though. Like the results show it. They got the graphs.
Got the graphs. Okay.
Figure 2A depicts the extracted attitude network. Visual inspection of the clusters reveals two attitude clusters. You can see the cluster on the left is really small, and the cluster on the right is really big.
So let's look at so let's actually read this. So visual inspection of the network reveals two attitude.
You there?
Sorry. As shown in figure 2b, the cluster reflecting the Democrat belief system almost exclusively contained extreme attitudes as indicated by strong disagreement with each of the 8 terms. Conversely, the cluster reflecting the Republican belief system contained a wider range of attitude responses ranging from mild disagreement to maximum agreement. Note that these nuances would remain undetected by methods that consider Likert type, I don't know what that is, Likert type items as intervals or use arbitrary cutoffs. Supporting information B in Appendix S1 provides an overview of the specific issue positions that correspond to each cluster. So I'm looking at a chart right now, and I can show you guys the chart really quick. Let me pull it up just so everybody can see it. So we're looking at this chart here. So these charts apparently show clustering of okay, so extracted attitude network. The first chart is a visual representation of the extracted attitude network revealing a distribution of 40 attitudes into 2 clusters. Note dark blue equals strong disagreement, pale blue is moderate disagreement, gray is neutral, orange is moderate agreement, red is strong agreement. And then B is 2 attitude clusters depicting latent Democrat and Republican red belief systems. So what we're finding, I guess we can think about this chart, is that depending on agreement on certain topics, I suppose we could go look at what the topics are. Depending on agreement, what you'll find is that if you agree on the things on the left, then you're more likely to be a Democrat, right? If you agree with things on the right, you're more likely to be a Republican. But this just means that there's more topics that Republicans disagree on than otherwise. Sorry. That could
Which
come
means
off.
that if you take,
hold on, sorry,
I misspoke.
I misspoke.
If you take a group of Republicans, you're going to be able to find some people in that group.
I misspoke. You miss it. So what this means is that amongst the topics they chose, Republicans disagree with more of them. Not disagree with each other, but they disagree with more of them. They just like they chose 40 topics, and Republicans tend to disagree with like 30 of them.
No,
that's why there's more red. That's that's exactly what that's saying. There's more red.
Well, I mean, yes, Republicans tend to disagree with more of them, but they don't like align on which ones they disagree on, right? It is every Republican disagrees with a random smattering of like.
Well, no, they do. They do. The point is that
there's no overall like coherent pattern to. There's a large diversity of what topics we agree on, which ones are disagreed on.
No. But the point is you're not reading the chart right. The point is that you can identify. If you're on this side of the chart, if you agree with the things on this side of the chart, you'll be a Republican. If you agree with the things on this side of the chart, you'll be a Democrat. What this is just saying is that you can identify whether someone's a Democrat or Republican based off of their attitudes towards certain positions. And obviously that's the case. It's called a web of beliefs. But like this is not saying that Republicans are more diverse.
Yeah, that's why the red chart is so much more spread out than the
blue
one.
There's just more red points.
If you're a Democrat,
there's just more red points.
If you're a Democrat, you're going to agree. You're much more likely to agree with all of the Democrat policies. If you're a Republican, you only agree with some of the Republican policies.
The distance doesn't mean anything here. Being spread out doesn't mean anything here. No, it doesn't. They don't indicate that it means anything.
Oh my God, do I have to read the study for you too?
Yes, you know what you should do? You should read studies before you bring them up. That's usually a good advice.
I had read the study.
Wait, you had read the study? Wait, you had read the study? Then why did you have to pull it up from a tabloid?
Because I didn't have it, like, in my back pocket. I Googled it to find the study, and the first result that popped up on Google was the tabloid. And then I clicked on the source of the tabloid to find the study. That's how you normally find it. Isn't that how you normally find studies? They talk about it in a tabloid, and then you click on the source of the tabloid to read the study?
No, generally not. No.
Maybe I'm using the term tabloid too broadly. I don't actually know what tabloid means. I just call anything that's not a scientific study a tabloid, really.
Okay, that's a strange thing to say.
Yeah, I say a lot of strange things.
So let me show you another thing that's just interesting. And you know, it's interesting because it's probably worth studying. So here's another it's from a paper that I was pulling up while we were looking for stuff. It's called "American Partisans Vastly Underestimate the Diversity of Other Partisans' Policy Attitudes," which you're doing, by the way. But that's neither here nor there. So we can just go scroll down and we can look at the actual distribution on things like gun control, border control, and abortion access. So generally what we're seeing, sorry, let me zoom this out a little bit. Just on these three topics, what we see is that Democrats tend to be tend to have a lot wider of a position on gun control. Democrats tend to be a lot more centrist on border control, but they do tend to be more extreme on abortion access. So like that's kind of expected, actually. Like Democrats are pretty moderate on border control and on gun control, not very moderate on abortion access. Conservatives tend to be very, very extreme on gun control, very, very extreme on border control, and then not very extreme on abortion access. So it just seems like, I mean, just from these three things, it seems like it's the opposite, at least, you know, amongst those three categories. But we could look further. And the point is that actually, apparently, both groups are fairly diverse, right?
Well, I mean, if we go back to the study, I found the part where they explain how the visualization works here. You know, to build up the attitude network, we estimated the
Did you hear what I just said?
Each attitude position. Yeah, I did. You said
okay, what did I say?
Both sides underestimate the diversity of thought on the other side.
No, but the specific details of the thing I was actually talking about, not just the title of the paper.
You said that and you said that in more words. That it's like, yeah, you did a study and you found that most people underestimate the diversity of thought on the other side.
No, I was talking about the difference in the diversity of opinions on gun control, border control, and abortion access amongst Republicans and Democrats. I mean, it's fine you weren't listening because I know that you were reading the other article, but the point is that, like, I mean, maybe it is the case that, like, maybe it is the case that Republicans have more diversity of thought, but that just means that people with, you know, what you might call, like even if I grant that, supposing for the sake of argument that I grant that is the case, that just means that there's more people who have views that are anti-scientific, right?
Sure, I guess.
Which
if that's how you want to.
That's not what we want, right? Like, so if you had a party that was generally pro-science and a party that was generally anti-science, you would expect that the party that is generally pro-science to be filled with people that are in basically complete agreement on scientific questions, right?
Yeah.
So there'd be less diversity there because they'd be in complete agreement on the scientific questions. Whereas the party that is anti-science, you would have wildly disagreeing answers because there'd be no objective measure of what the correct answer is. That's accepted, right?
Sure.
So even if I grant that Republicans are more likely to have a more diverse point of view, then I don't know how that gets you away from the MAGA being anti-science accusation.
Well, okay, when I was talking about MAGA being just as anti or more pros, or the Democrats being more anti-science than MAGA, I'm referring to the political parties. I'm not referring to the individual voters. Obviously, if you're an individual voter and you're pro-science, you're more likely to vote Democrat than you are to vote Republican. Like that's a given.
Would you say that
denying obvious facts?
Okay, would you say that if you are interested in if you care about having policies driven by scientific consensus, would you say that you should vote Democrat or you should vote Republican or neither?
I think the should there. Yeah, I think not. I mean, I think you should vote for either a Democrat or a Republican. Like, I think if you're living in America, it's stupid it's stupid to vote third party. It's stupid to not vote. you gotta pick the lesser evil.
Okay, so if you're interested in voting,
the only issue that you're voting on is whether the party is pro-science. I don't think you can make a clean distinction between the two.
But didn't you just say that pro-science people are more likely to vote for Democrats?
Yeah.
Okay, why do you think that is?
Because Democratic politicians pander to pro-science people more than Republican politicians. They pay lip service.
So that could be a plausible explanation, but we could go look at the data. So how many scientists are in Trump's cabinet? Do you know?
I don't, but I'm guessing it's 0.
It's 0. Yeah. How many scientists were in Biden's cabinet?
How many of them got listened to?
They were in the cabinet. That means that they were heads of departments.
Okay, and sure, probably more. Let's say 12,
I think it was 3. I think it was 3. There's
less than I thought.
I think there's like 10 cabinet positions, or like there's like less than 20. Yeah, so there's not a lot of cabinet positions. So like, I mean, like you don't need a scientist to head up like, you know, the Department of Homeland Security, right? That doesn't really make sense. You would want a scientist to head up the Department of Energy, or to head up the Department of...
Why wouldn't you want a scientist running the Department of Homeland Security?
Well, because a scientist isn't going to be an expert on security, right? Like that's not a scientist's job, right? A scientist wouldn't study like national security.
Job isn't to know how to run government, so I don't understand why we got them in the government either.
So you would want a scientist running an organization whose main concerns are science, right? Department of Agriculture.
I'd want a good manager.
Yeah.
I want a good manager running the organization. I'd want the people in the organization to be scientists. But does the guy in charge need to be a scientist?
So I mean, like, look, if you have a hospital, would you want it to be run by a doctor, or would you want it to be run by like, I don't know, like a what are they called? Like a supplement salesman?
I'd rather be run by a competent manager, rather than a supplement salesman or a doctor.
Okay, you have 2 options: supplement salesman or doctor. You don't know anything about their managerial.
Doctor. I mean, I feel like their qualifications as a doctor or a supplement salesman are largely irrelevant. I'd be more concerned about which one can manage the hospital better.
To be clear, you think that a doctor's expertise is irrelevant to managing a hospital?
Yes, a doctor knows how to heal people and make them better. A doctor does not know how to manage. A doctor is not trained in the art of managing like groups of people and managing labor. That's not
okay. I mean, like that's an interesting perspective. I'll just let that one sit. That you don't think that a doctor is well equipped, or a doctor's expertise is relevant to managing a hospital.
I don't think doctors are trained in how to manage, and they aren't. Like that's just truth. They're trained on how to heal people and get people better.
Okay.
Like, just because I'm a good like carpenter doesn't mean that I should be the foreman, right?
Okay.
It means that I'm good at being a carpenter.
So this is to say that so we agreed, or at least like I asserted, and I think you just granted it, that there are no scientists in Trump's current admin, and there were scientists in Biden's admin. There were scientists in Obama's admin, etc. So at least putting scientists in charge of things that require scientific expertise, that is at least more in favor of doing things that scientists would actually think are true than otherwise. Right?
I don't necessarily grant that. Like, just because somebody has the qualification of a scientist, are these even scientists that agree with the scientific consensus?
Yes.
Are they making policies that agree with the scientific consensus?
Yeah. At least under Obama.
What's a policy that's been introduced by Biden's cabinet that aligns with the scientific consensus?
That it's useful to invest in green energy production.
That's not a policy.
That is a policy. It's not a law. That is absolutely a policy.
No, a policy is a thing that you do, not an opinion you have on what it is or isn't useful to do. Investing in green energy would be...
Yeah, okay. Investing in green energy is a thing that was done by the Biden administration.
Okay, but I'd say the amount that the Biden administration invested in green energy was really just lip service. Like, it's not enough to make a meaningful difference.
Okay, I agree. They should have done more. I agree.
Like it's just
how much money do you? How much money do you?
They're still
So
pumping oil and gas.
so
they didn't. The thing that we need to do to stop climate change is to restrict
so
oil and gas. Like, no
interestingly enough,
how
so
much green
so
energy we
Joe
output,
Biden,
it's
so
restricting oil and gas.
Joe Biden at the end of his term, awarded over $100 billion in grants, created by its. I'm just reading from Reuters now. Created by its signature climate law. So like, I don't know, man. That seems like a lot of money.
Okay, but like, no amount of green energy is going to reverse climate change. We need to reduce the amount of oil and gas that we're outputting. And under Biden, just like under Obama, just like under Trump, just like under every president, the amount of oil and gas that we harvested went up.
No amount of green energy. No amount of green energy will. To be clear, no amount of green energy will reduce. Okay.
No amount of
Okay.
green
That's a
energy
claim.
will stop the oil and gas that we're pulling out the ground from being burned and turned into CO2, and that's the thing that's causing climate change. If we build
And
a
so
trillion solar panels,
which party has elected politicians who say that we should not subsidize oil and gas companies?
both parties subsidize oil and gas companies.
No, sorry. Which party has politicians saying that we shouldn't do this?
I don't trust anything that a politician says.
Okay, so let's say that you're a Democrat in 2025 in the House, say. You do not have control of the House. What are you supposed to do besides vote for laws that are in favor of your positions and say what your positions are? What are you supposed to do? Because you can't pass laws.
If I'm a Democrat in the House in 2025, I was also a Democrat in the House in 2023 when we held both the House
Not necessarily.
and the Senate, and we should have done something fucking then.
Well, yeah. So to be clear, if you're a Democrat in the House in 2025, to be clear, if you're a Democrat in the House in 2025, you're not necessarily a Democrat in the House in 2023. That's not true. That's not how the that's not how our electoral system works. I understand that as a Canadian you don't understand the American political system, but that's not how the political system works. Every representative is up for re-election every 2 years.
And how many unique Democrats are actually in the
That's
House
a good question.
in the Senate? It's like what, 4 or 5? It's not a significant number.
Let's find out. So there's 115 Democrats in the sorry, there's 150 those are called new. We just have to go look if we want to look at the took office. Here we go. So we have where does it say? Okay. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. Or wait a minute, hold on. Now I'm very confused. That's birth year. Okay. Took office. Here we go. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I guess 4 took office as of January 3rd. Oh, that's the Senate. I'm sorry. No, okay. So then yeah, I was my count was right. My count was right. It's like 40. Like 30 or 40. I can count all of them if you want, but
it's a lot more than I expected, I'll be honest.
Well, the house changes a lot, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I still feel like there's 130 Democrats in the House at the moment. Like that's still better
200
than
something.
Chance. Yeah, okay, that's still way better than average chance.
But the point still stands.
If I'm a Democrat in the House, I was a Democrat in the House in 2023.
So you do understand. You do understand that you do understand that the Senate can't pass non-budget related bills unless they have 60 votes or more, right?
Sure, but like the Democrats.
And the Democrats never had that. No, that they didn't have They didn't have a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, which means that they can't pass anything but budget bills.
They did under Obama.
For 2 years, I think they did, right? From 2008 to 2010.
Yeah, and they did fucking nothing.
Well, no, I mean they passed the ACA, right? That was like the big thing that they were pushing for.
Ooh, yeah, cool. Democrats get the House and the Senate for 2 years, and they pass one policy that has nothing to do with climate change. That's totally the pro-science policy.
Yeah, so you're right. That isn't a pro-science policy, or it's not a pro-climate change policy. You could argue it's pro-science, but that's a separate conversation. The point is that they had a different priority, which was healthcare, and healthcare is a big priority for Democrats. It's one of the biggest priorities.
The idea that it took 2 years to pass
to
one
pass
bill when they
pass
had
an
full
enormous
control
bill,
over
yeah.
the House and the Senate is absurd. Republicans have
Sorry,
had control of the House
I'm
and the
sorry
Senate
that you don't
for
like
like
how
6 months,
politics
and
works.
they've done like 10 times the amount.
They haven't. I
They
actually don't
have,
think that they've
they
passed
don't have
anything
the
but a
will
budget
to
bill.
do stuff.
Okay, I agree. The Democratic Party needs to be more aggressive.
They don't do anything pro science. Like
I mean, they do. Like
for 2 years, and they passed no climate change.
To be clear, they do.
Party that
like
cares about climate change.
Biden did do that. That was like the Inflation Reduction Act got like $100 billion to climate policy, right? Like that's huge.
Did it reduce oil and gas production? Or did we increase oil and gas production under Biden?
Probably increased. We could go look at the numbers. And
It
yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that. You're right.
The amount of CO2 that we're producing, regardless of the number of solar panels.
Hold on, actually, I don't know if this is true. Hold on. Hold on, let's check this because you might just be talking out your ass. Which understandable if you don't know things. It is the best place to talk from. That's true. So the CO2 emission. Oh, that's going up. I want more recent data than that. I want through 2024. So CO2 emissions. Where's a good chart for this? Net emissions. That's only up to 2021. Do we not have any data from any more recent data?
Also, if we're counting emissions, make sure we're not counting like carbon credits that we're selling to other countries, because that's just like.
No, we're talking emissions. We're talking emissions. Don't worry, we're talking emissions.
Well, no, but like if we're counting emissions, often they do like net emissions, and then they'll count like carbon credits that we bought from other countries as like emissions that were. But that's just like us offloading.
So
pollution on other countries. That's not actually reducing anything.
Yeah. I know you're very hungry to, stave off being wrong. But look, so here are carbon dioxide emissions. This is just strictly from energy consumption, so it doesn't have anything to do with credits or anything. So obviously in 2020 we saw a huge drop, and then it went back up in 2021 and 2022, and then it dropped again in 2023 and 2024. So it actually seems like the US was following the general trend down of decreasing carbon emissions in the second half of Biden's term. So you're just wrong. Carbon emissions decreased, at least from energy production. We can go look at carbon emissions from other sources, but I'm having trouble finding any data on this at all. Any recent data, I should say. And by the way, actually, we could look at that chart if you, where did it go? Where'd it go? Anyway, neither here nor there. But the point is that yes, carbon emissions did decrease under Biden, after we recovered from COVID, which obviously carbon emissions are going to go back up. But the point still stands that, look, generally speaking, if we just go look at pro-climate policy, it's, at least in the last 20 years, has been pushed by Democrats. How successful it's been is a good question. Because of the filibuster in the Senate, it makes it very, very hard to actually push any non-budget policies.
Under Obama, we had filibuster. The Dems had filibuster majority.
Yeah, and they got the ACA, and they got the ACA. That was the big landmark bill that they got passed, which is a big deal.
Republicans had filibuster majority for 2 years.
They would dismantle. They would dismantle
the country.
Yeah, you're right. So yeah, they would have dismantled all of the climate protections that we have in place, because they're anti-science.
They would have gutted everything in the country. They would have stopped the country spending any money on anything, cut all taxes to everything. Like that's their economic policy, is that they want no taxes and no spending for the government. That's their.
Okay, so by the way, just to be clear, this is actually interesting because like I'm just completely misremembering this. So the Senate supermajority under Obama lasted for 72 days, 72 working days. 72 days. That's all they had.
Okay. That's 72 bills that they should have passed, and they passed one.
Okay, so I get that you don't understand how American politics works, but American politics tends to be slow. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's the nature of the story. So
it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be slow. If you have the Senate supermajority, you have filibuster protection. You just vote on things. You run bill after bill after bill, and you keep voting. There's
well,
no
yeah,
reason to stop.
but that's because you need to get all of your party in line on something, right?
Yeah, because the Democrats aren't a politically motivated
because
party.
the Democrats are diverse
is what
it sounds like you're saying.
Republicans don't need, when the Republicans get power, they don't need to get the party in line. You know
so
why?
are you
Because
saying that
all their time
are you
when
saying
they
that
didn't
the
have
Democrats
power,
have
getting their
diverse
party
thought?
in line.
Are you saying that Democrats have Democratic politicians have diversity of thought?
No, I'm saying Democratic politicians are more subservient to their are subservient to their individual like capitalistic interests, and they don't care about the party. Like they're not a functional political party.
Right. So they're more diverse in their interests. Sounds like what you're saying.
Sure. I guess among Democratic politicians, I guess
there's more diversity. Okay. Anyway, I mean, it's been pretty clear
among politicians, that's a bad thing. You don't want that. You want your politicians to all line up so that they can.
I even agree with you, but regardless, the point is that Democratic politicians are overwhelmingly more in favor of green energy production, rescinding of tax breaks for oil and gas production.
They're really in favor of saying that.
Okay.
They aren't in favor of doing anything about it.
Okay. He's relying on the counterfactual that they wouldn't actually do anything if they had power, which, I mean, they did. They don't do as much as I'd like them to, but they do things, right? Like, obviously, they do things. All right, let's bring up John Jackson. How's it going? Oh, I think I have a super chat. Sorry, John, I have to mute you 1 sec. Just for the super chats, and then I'll bring you up next. John Jackson with the $5. The distance is denoting the statistical likelihood between two items being answered the same. The color is right. Yeah, that's quite plausible. JL with the $2 Australian saying, "Give my first dono to SAG, please kick this dude, OMG." And then Garba with the 5 Canuck bucks. This study shows there's lots of ways to be wrong and only a couple ways to be right. That's a fair point. All right, John Jackson, what you got for me?
Hi. I mean, I don't know. I guess, do you want to run down like the first lists for me to answer first?
Yeah. So, are you MAGA?
I voted for Trump twice. Yeah.
Okay. And when I ask, are you MAGA? Like, generally, what this means is like, do you support what's still happening? Do you support the general, like, the general policies that Trump pushes for?
I support Trump. I like Trump.
Okay. Because some people voted for Trump and they're like, oh, actually, I think that this, like, I did it because I didn't like Kamala, or now I regret it. Anyway. Okay. Now, questions. As we have the usual, we have some questions to go over. First, do you think that humans caused the majority of the climate change that we're seeing right now?
I don't know about that. Actually, I don't know if anyone does know that.
Okay. Do you think that humans evolved from non-human primates?
Yes, but I generally find when people say that like humans aren't animals, I think that's what they hear from that. That's actually a pretty meaningful statement, because if we just say that humans are animals, then we lose terminology like you're acting like an animal. And
okay, but that wasn't the question, right? That's why I ask it in a scientific sense rather than saying, do you think humans are animals? Like I ask, do you think humans evolved from non-human primates?
Yeah, no, I guess I was saying that I think people reject that idea for, like, are kind of right to reject it because they don't understand the implications that are often read into it. They see that.
If they reject, okay, well, so what do you believe on this?
Well, I think that people are not animals. I think we're made in the image of God.
That wasn't my question. Do you think that humans evolved from non-human primates?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that vaccines are generally safe and effective?
If I had to guess, I would think that probably the majority that we give out probably do like no harm to do nothing to a little harm.
Okay.
That's if I had to guess, because there's just a lot of them. There's a lot of them haven't been like tested that well, I don't think.
So I'm talking about the ones that are administered to the majority of Americans.
Yeah. So
okay.
I heard that I don't think it's 80 different, but I know there's like 80 vaccines on the schedule. From 0 to 18, and I'm like that, like especially that going up to that in like 50 years, I'm like, there's no way that that's all helpful.
Okay, so you don't think that the majority of those are safe and effective?
I'd say or, you know what I mean? I don't think that probably a lot of them aren't that effective. Actually, I wasn't vaccinated as a baby. I wasn't vaccinated until about like 5th grade,
We grant
I was
that.
on the news for it.
Okay, and do you think that that there's a useful scientific distinction to be made between gender and sex?
I think the term gender is a bad term. I think that the structure of masculine and feminine captures all that much better. Gender kind of seems to kind of devolve. Like if gender just meant masculine and feminine, I would say, yeah, that's real. But especially talking about like gender from a neurophysiological perspective, that's not really a thing.
Okay, cool. So it looks like you're kind of like on the fence on some of these, except with regards to evolution, which cool. I'm glad you're on the fence on that. Yeah. So, and would you say that generally MAGA says yes to most of those questions, no to most of those questions, on the fence for most of those questions? What's your general view?
My general view is that that they don't think that climate change is a big issue, that they I guess I don't remember if that was yes or no to those responses, but what you said seems accurate.
Okay, so it sounds like you agree with me then that MAGA is generally anti-science, because if you answered yes to all those questions, that would be an agreement with scientific consensus on all of those topics. And if MAGA is willing to be like, yeah, no, actually no to those questions more often than not, then they just don't care about the scientific consensus.
Well,
right?
I don't accept that not agreeing with the scientific consensus makes you anti-science, for one. And I also don't believe that just because you don't necessarily use like the scientific method to get your answer, that your belief is anti-science. Like, a lot of things are just so complicated that I think people just kind of rely on what people told them before.
Right.
And I think that's actually fine, because there's literally so complicated that if you try and meddle with them now, you'll likely come out with a wrong response, even though you think you know everything. And so that's kind of sort of element of just being like, no, I think.
I actually agree with you 100%. The point is that, like, in fact, if you are not an expert on something, especially with complicated things, then it is more responsible to just go get your opinion from what the experts say. And so that's what people should do. The climate is complicated, vaccines are complicated, evolution is complicated. These are all complicated things. So if you want to be well informed, the right thing to do is to go ask what an expert, or go ask what the experts say. And the experts will agree that the answer to all of those questions I asked was yes. And it seems like the fact that MAGA isn't doing this is either saying that MAGA has terrible epistemology, or that they just don't care about what the scientific consensus is, and they care about something else. In fact, it seems like they actively oppose scientific consensus. They oppose scientific investigation through their actions.
Okay, I have to go to, just to clarify, I do have to go to work soonish, so if
sure.
I have to, I'm sorry. But like, for instance, I mean, if we take like the climate change issue as just one of them, like, just because you accept that human activity contributes to the climate warming, that doesn't mean that that I think you can make a very hard scientific argument that we should be like stopping the production of natural gas.
I never said that. I'm talking. So the actions that I'm referring to are the
comes in like a package, and so I'm talking about what is like the best kind of, you could say, about scientific response, even though if you might believe something wrong. Look, a lot of people believe the Earth is flat, but they
science. So the scientific consensus is not about what you should do in a vacuum. It's what you should do if you'd like to achieve certain ends, right? And then also what is. So, for example, what is the case is that yes, human emissions are the overwhelming cause for the climate change that we're currently experiencing.
That's overwhelming cause? That's contested, isn't it?
It's not contested.
I've heard a lot of people.
Well, I mean, it might be contested by like 5 people, but like it's not like that. That is the consensus. That is the consensus. Appealing to Nobel Prize winners is not necessarily appealing to the correct thing.
Okay. I mean, they have like, degrees in first of all, the term climate science is kind of a weird phrase in the first place, because
climatologists.
Science, I mean, that involves like
climatologists, and then to a lesser extent atmospheric scientists and geophysicists.
Yeah, and fluid scientists. That involves physics, involves biology, involves.
So look, what I'm saying is that the vast majority.
It's not, you know what I mean? It's like a hard field, and the people who are in it, I don't think are necessarily.
The vast majority, like the vast majority of people who study the climate for a living, they agree that humans are the overwhelming cause overwhelming majority of cause for the climate change that we're experiencing. Now, and that's not even debatable. Like we just have polls. We just have polls that indicate this. This is not like a debatable point.
The polls that you're talking about, it says not that humans are the overwhelming majority. Excuse me, not the overwhelming. The question is just, do humans contribute to climate change? Yes, 99% of scientists agree, but they don't include the overwhelming majority. That's not part of it. I mean, it contributes to the overwhelming, like there's a big problem because as the ocean heats, it releases carbon.
So to be clear, when people say humans cause climate change, what does that mean to you? When a scientist says humans cause climate change, does that mean that humans are like a little baby cause, like just a little tiny contribution, or is it like humans are the cause of climate change?
My understanding is that we don't know because
but we do know. This is we can measure how much carbon we put into the atmosphere. We absolutely do know. We can do a causative analysis, like a causative analysis using. We can do a causative analysis, and you can show that humans cause, at minimum, 75 to 80% of the climate change that we are currently observing. At minimum.
No one knows that.
I can show you a study. Want me to show you a study?
Some estimates, you know what I mean?
Want me to show you a study?
Are you saying is responsible for that much carbon in the atmosphere?
No, for climate change. That's
warming. You're saying
for the amount of warming. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. No one knows that.
Okay. Do you want me to show you a study?
I mean, yeah, you can show me one.
Here, I linked it in the chat. I linked it in the chat. I'll pull it up for the YouTube viewers.
Okay.
It's called the study is called On the Causal Structure Between CO2 and Global Temperature. And what you'll find in the abstract is it says specifically it is confirmed that the former, especially CO2, are the main causal drivers of the recent warming. Now, in fact, they talk
about that we're responsible for the CO2. We don't even know that aspect, which is like I said, is
they talk about that later in the article. They talk about that later in the article.
Okay.
They specifically talk about anthropogenic. In fact, they specifically talk about that like in the abstract. They say the spatial explicit analysis. Sorry, this is not what I was referring to. The spatial explicit analysis reveals that the anthropogenic forcing fingerprint is significantly regionally varying in both hemispheres. That's referring to the spatial analysis. But we can go look elsewhere in the paper. This is a quote from somewhere else. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, so this
is also a completely separate conversation about whether carbon in the atmosphere is a good or bad thing. I tend to think it's actually a good thing. Like more energy is good for
I mean that's an interesting claim, but okay, so do you not? Sorry?
It's a physics claim.
Well, good or bad is not a physics claim.
I know, good or bad isn't, but saying having more energy is good for what do you say? Begets the procreation of life from the basic building blocks is a physics claim.
So just as a reference, here's a relevant quote, just so then we can get off this topic. But they say further work based on an improved methodology, however, confirmed that anthropogenic forcings, that means anthropogenic things like CO2 emissions, seem to Granger cause temperature changes. The whole purpose of the study is to kind of elucidate on what a Granger cause is and to see if it's holds up to other methods of causative analysis, and they find that it does.
Okay.
But yeah, it is just known that humans are the major cause of climate change. Absolutely. That is like a
lot of well-respected authorities who are like, I don't know who wrote that. You know what I mean? I don't know. There are some scientists that I trust because I see them as being very intelligent and knowing a lot about the topic, and they're pretty unsure about how much people contribute. They don't make a statement because it's kind of too hard to know. And like I said,
it's actually like really easy to tell. You can analyze things like you can analyze like solar activity. You can correlate. You can see like how much that causes climate emissions, or how much that causes climate change. You can analyze volcanic activity. You can analyze like these are things that you can analyze, and they did in this paper, and they find that volcanic emissions don't contribute significantly at all. Solar irradiance has a causative relationship with climate change of up to about 20% of the climate change that we're seeing. So if it were the case that the sun had been getting hotter over the last 150 years, then it would account for about 20% of the 20 to 25% of the climate change that we're seeing. So this is to say that 20% of the temperature variations over the last 250 years or so can be accounted for by solar changes, which means that when the sun gets warmer and colder over a 12-year period, so over the 12-year period, the deviations from just basically the straight upward trend as a result of CO2 emissions, there's deviations from that up to about 20% coming from the sun.
Okay. Like, hey, that's honestly, if that's true, that's fine. But
it's in the paper.
What? Yeah, I know. I'm suspect about making claims that try and take in that many things into account. Like, that's a pretty, like, incredible claim, I think. But but just generally, I mean, like, why do we think that carbon is a bad thing for the environment? Like, why, because I think in my head, when you go back in the past, because carbon's actually been dwindling since it came about.
It's not a question of bad or good. It's an empirical claim that increasing carbon is increasing warming. That's the empirical claim. Now, whether you can make a value judgment about that, and then you can say, oh, well, that's a good thing, so we should actually cause this more, and that's fine. You wouldn't technically be anti-science, but that's a value claim, not an empirical claim.
But okay, but generally, I would say that, like, oftentimes people who don't believe in it, they say the idea that we can, like, destroy the earth and stuff, that's like a kind of a hubristic claim. Only God can do something like that. And so there are, like, I think there, in a way, there is truth to that idea. Maybe not exactly that, but
I mean, it's just false. Like, obviously, destroying rainforests, building cities, emitting tons of CO2, like billions of tons of CO2 will obviously affect the world.
Saying that the increase of CO2 actually creates rainforests. It's a greenhouse effect, and so
no, but well, so to be clear, deforestation of the planet has decreased in the last 20 years.
Yeah,
there are fewer
on top of that, basically the region of green life at the equator has been expanding because the available carbon.
That may be the case. I'm just talking about total forest coverage. Look, all I'm saying is that
sorry.
Like, all I'm saying is that generally, MAGA is not interested in funding science. It's not interested in promoting science. It's not interested in encouraging science, and it's very interested in just discounting scientific claims. That's what it means to be anti-science.
In the past, I know, like, when I've grown up, it feels like almost that science has, like, stepped into the realm of philosophy for a lot of folks, and people use science to back up like, positions that have a teleological backing. You know what I mean? Like, when they're saying, like, you should trust the science.
Well, no, I mean, like that's good epistemology, right? Like that's a good epistemology.
Saying that you should trust science and do what science tells you to do?
No, that you should believe what they tell you.
Right, but there's behind, like, when you're saying
that's good epistemology.
It's including, hey, we need to do these set of things that the scientists are telling us to do. But there's a teleology behind.
You can. I mean, if you want to read it that way, I guess. But my point is what I'm saying is that it's good epistemology to believe what scientists are telling you about their field. And MAGA doesn't seem interested in that. MAGA seems like it actually is interested in the opposite.
Well, look, I mean, a lot of fields, I think, do kind of get so self-obsessed that they don't really relate well to the outside world. Like, I'm thinking a lot. First thing that comes to mind is the stuff about gender, because that stuff is, like, for a lot of just normal folks, they kind of consider, like, whatever study is telling you to go, like, to do those things to a kid, that's not right. You know what I mean?
Well, again, those are policy prescriptions. Those are not scientific claims.
Well, they are tied up because, like, I mean, the idea that you can become the opposite gender, that you can, that's a fact or not, and it seems like it's not a fact.
Neuroscientists seem to disagree with you.
Okay, so there are differences in male and female brains, but those are just differences in average of morphology, essentially. And it's not like just because you have a female typical brain doesn't make you a female. It just means you have a bigger.
Yeah, the point is that it makes you. The point is that because there's distinctions between expressed sex and the experience of sex, if you will, there's a useful distinction to be made between what we think of as sex and what we think of as gender. Because you might have like physiological sex being distinct from psychological, or the psychological experience of sex. Hence, the distinction is relevant.
So I'm like, there are different levels of what you're talking about here. There's the outer body, and we'll just leave intersex aside for a little bit. You know what I mean? As far as, like, one being the larger gametes, and one being the one that has more variation and just tries to find that one. You get the pattern between the sexes. I'm guessing. And then there's also the physiological aspect, with the, like, more, you could say, social, where there's differences in personality type between men and women, and there's still overlap between them. Although if you take in all the factors on a personality test, you can, with accuracy, distinguish between sex. Like, the personality differences between all the traits put together is I think it's over 2.5 standard deviations. You know what I mean? And that's just in looking at personality. And over 2.5 standard deviations, there's very, very little overlap, meaning that you can tell if someone's a man or a woman by their personality type, like 99% of the time. So even on that level, it's like that one in the middle. It's like, yeah, it's kind of hard.
And
but
the point is that like it is like amongst neuroscientists, amongst well, I mean, neuroscientists are the people that I've referenced because these are the people who study the interaction between the brain and or between the biology of the brain and psychology of the brain, right?
yeah,
But so amongst neuroscientists, endocrinologists, psychologists, they generally all agree that there is a useful distinction to be made between sex and gender.
I know, but they're using gender in the term of masculine, feminine, basically like a cultural expression. And even so, I don't like the term of gender.
I mean, maybe the National Academies of Science, the National Academies of Science, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine defined sex and gender differently. So according to the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, sex is a multidimensional construct based on a cluster of anatomical and physiological traits that include external genitalia, secondary sex characteristics, gonads, chromosomes, and hormones. Whereas they define gender as a multidimensional construct that links gender identity, which is a core element of a person's individual identity, gender expression, which is how a person signals their gender to others through their behavior and appearance, and cultural expectations about social status, characteristics, and behaviors that are associated with sex traits. So I mean,
the gender identity is a category with no content. Like the rest of that makes sense as far as like the gender distinction of saying.
Okay, I mean, you can hold that position. I'm just telling you that this is what the scientific consensus is.
I'm not going by, like I said, it's not about the consensus. I mean, people have had consensus about insane things in the past.
Okay, I mean, like, look, then it sounds like your position is that we should disregard scientific consensus, which you're allowed to hold that position. Now, how do you feel about funding scientific institutions?
Way to win an argument.
I'm not claiming it is. I'm not saying that makes it true. I'm saying that is that you are going against the scientific consensus, which is objectively the case. That's what you're doing right now.
And by the way, my opinion was initially to just listen. I mean, from my perspective, it wasn't necessarily what the scientists were telling me; it's what the TV was telling me, and say that, oh yeah, like transgender stuff, that's all real. And then I listened to my first debate between trans people, and I realized, oh, there isn't a masculine female brain. They're literally just saying that a male and female brain. They're literally just saying that like. The way I'm identifying that's like that is the argument, and I was like, oh, what the fuck? And then I read more neuroscience, and I was like, yeah, no, this is like all pretty
So
there's always lady boys.
This is irrelevant.
Like okay, but
so
it's crazy.
You've agreed that you're totally fine with just disregarding scientific consensus when it disagrees with your point of view. Fine. Do you think that it's a good thing?
Not my point of view. It disagrees with the facts that I see. Like I didn't choose that position. It's like I saw that 2 + 2 = 2,
okay.
And I said.
So do you think that it is useful, or do you think that it's good to defund scientific institutions?
I can't make a statement like that. Like which ones? Like are they eugenic institutions?
Like NASA, like NASA, the NSF, NIH, CDC.
I think. I mean, I don't know what the best way to handle. Like, I'm just some guy, but I think the NIH and the CDC have both massively failed. Like the NIH, when I was a kid, was recommending that people mostly eat bread. And look at people now, we're all dying of like dementia and being too fat. Like that's crazy, and it's directly because they're, how you said about you don't want to get the snake oil salesman be selling you you're giving you your research papers. Well, that's what happened with the NIH and the food pyramid.
So do you think that we should defund the NIH and the CDC and NASA and the NSF?
Oh no, that's not what I was saying. Like,
okay, that's my question.
I think probably usually when things are really sick, you need to let a lot of it die and then let the core part come back. That's usually what you need to do.
Okay, so can you give me details about what's particularly sick about the NASA Science Division?
About the NASA Science Division?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really sure if anything's sick about them, but I think a lot of the stuff is being taken over by SpaceX.
Not the Science Division.
Much cheaper?
Nope, not the Science Division. The SpaceX doesn't interact with the Science Division at all.
I don't know. I'd have to look at the specific things that they cut. I know
they cut the NASA Science Division in half.
That like Doge cut.
This isn't Doge cut. This isn't a Doge thing, by the way. This is just the NASA budget request from the head of NASA who was appointed by Trump. This is saying, look, we are cutting our science division in half.
That was I'm in a group chat with a bunch of like liberally nerds, and they're all saying that was Elon's idea.
It may have been Elon's idea, but it didn't have anything to do with Doge. This is part of the NASA 2026 budget request.
Okay, and I'm not sure they could be wrong. They're wrong about a lot of things. I was like, that's what I thought.
And by the way, so I can give you an example of one of the things that they're killing. They're killing the Chandra X-ray Observatory, which is a telescope. It's a telescope in space. It's been in space since 1999, I want to say. It observes in the X-ray part of the electromagnetic spectrum. It is the highest resolution X-ray telescope that exists. There's nothing that's better than it. It's still operational. It has produced good science as recently as 2 months ago. Like, people are still using it actively. Scientists are still using it actively to produce good research. And it had a budget of about $20 million a year. Most of that, about 2/3 of that, was like maintenance and like the, making sure that the telecoms things were working correctly and that everything was maintained properly. About 1/3 of that was going towards like grants to use the telescope to actually do research with the data. About $20 million a year to keep this thing operational. And it was just completely killed, or at least that's what's the proposal in the 2026 NASA budget, to just completely kill this operational telescope. It's the best in the world, still doing good science, only cost $20 million.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like a bad idea, I guess.
That's like the entire story.
As a general perspective, I do think that government spending needs to be cut. I know what you said earlier was like, well, they just increase the deficit by passing another, you know what I mean? And like that's bad too. But at the same time, I would say I just moved into a new apartment, and partly along with that, as I want to start spending better, and so I'm budgeting and cutting a lot of things. But at the same time, I'm also buying a lot of new furniture for my new life. So it is hard to say that like at least some effort to start cutting things is a bad effort, because you do have to start somewhere.
Should you really be cutting so generally funding for basic scientific research pays much larger dividends than for example funding the DoD.
Yeah, because if you start something fundamental, applies to everything.
Yeah, and so like that story that I just told you about the Chandra X-ray Observatory, that's like the entire story of the NASA Science Division that's happening. Like there are like 40 ongoing missions that are just being killed, and like another 65 or 70 or so that are being significantly reduced in size. These are ongoing missions that, like, they were going along well. They were like and all to save like a drop in the bucket, right?
Yeah, I understand.
And so there's not really justification to do that, except if you want to
do what they do. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that SpaceX is going to take over this, or
SpaceX never does any scientific stuff. They never do that. They're a rocket company, not a science company.
Okay, that's fair.
Like, they're really good at building rockets. Absolutely, they're really good at building rockets. So if you want to cut the rocket division at NASA, maybe.
Like that. They find out things that are applicable for like the market and things like
that. Well, no,
but
but like they don't build telescopes, they don't build probes, they don't do any of this stuff. They don't maintain any of this stuff.
The point that I was making is that they do things for like 20 times cheaper. Or I think
yeah, they build rockets cheaper. They're very good at building rockets. Absolutely.
Like like NASA, that famous story about them spending like $1 million to make a pen. And
I'm pretty sure that's not true, by the way.
It's not? Okay, I know.
Yeah. But we can just double check. Fact or fiction? This is from God, I hate paywalls. Paywalls are the worst, aren't they? Okay. So maybe you don't like PolitiFact, but this is the second option that I could find. The first one was paywalled, but Facebook post says NASA spent more than $165 million over 10 years to develop a pen that writes in zero gravity upside down and in extreme temperatures, while the Russians instead used a pencil. Apparently, that's not true. Initially, both space programs used pencils. Both eventually started to use Fisher's Space Pen, which was developed and funded with private money, not government money. So it's just false.
Like 15 years. Oh my gosh.
So yeah, it's just not true. But yeah, I mean, the point is that like NASA does a lot of scientific research. There's another great example, the National Science Foundation. One of the largest projects that the National Science Foundation was funding. It was funding two big projects. One of them was at the Large Hadron Collider, which I think is still being funded. The other one is at LIGO, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory. Now, the United States has two of these things. With two of them, you can do some triangulation, and you can do signal-to-noise reduction. They're cutting one of them, meaning that we only have one, which means that we can't triangulate anymore. And it also means that we can't tell the difference between a localized earthquake and a gravitational wave passing by. So these two laboratories, which were built in tandem, they're supposed to work together. You're just cutting one of them in half. or you're just cutting it in half, and by doing that, you're basically killing the whole project for no reason.
That's exactly. I understand all that work to get to, and that probably makes such a difference as far as being able to tech things. I can imagine. Like, that's
And so like this is just the general story. Like amongst in the NSF, we have like basically half as many grants being awarded for basic scientific and mathematical research. Like I know less about the NIH and the CDC, but like it's generally the same story there. We're just like they're just like, well, we need to cut funding because we care about the deficits. Let's just slash all of the science. Oh wait, but we're going to increase the DoD budget by 105 or 150 billion dollars.
Right. Yeah.
It seems like they're not interested in deficit cutting. They're interested in killing science. That coupled with threatening universities, pulling out funding, reducing possibility of funding grad students, who are the people who do the majority of the science.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that might be an artifact of the fact that of the kind of sort of industry that Elon Musk is in, maybe because maybe these are industries that he's dealt with in the past, and he saw like
this doesn't have to do with Elon Musk. No? The Harvard, like the fact that universities are losing funding, like the fact that Harvard lost $450 million that goes to like cancer research and stuff. That's because Donald Trump didn't like them. Because they wouldn't bend the knee.
Like I can't really repeat what the university's professors said that they are okay with on their campus. I can't really repeat.
So what does restricting cancer research funding do?
Because if your fundamental DEI ideology that you're promoting around to people is like creating anti-Semites, that's kind of problematic, and we don't want. It's kind of like holding you hostage. Like, you know what I mean? We give you all this money to make society better, and why are you turning out a bunch of anti-Semites? Like, stop that. And you know, that was always kind of the logical conclusion of being woke in a way, because you're talking about like different identity groups oppressing other groups. It's like, but there's that one little group that runs all the business.
I think that you're misinterpreting what happened at Harvard. Because there are plenty of Jewish people at Harvard who were totally comfortable being there.
Okay.
Like absolutely, there were people who were also uncomfortable being there, who felt like that they were being attacked. Absolutely, but like
I'm more
removing $450 million. Like so this is me being conspiracy brained. I think Trump applied to Harvard, and he didn't get in. I think he was singling out Harvard for a very particular reason, because there's no other reason to target the world's best university to like honestly, reduce its quality or something. It doesn't make any sense.
Like Trump is most fundamentally like, in a way, he is like a populist. I mean, he really does want to do what the people want him to do. He wants people to love him, and I think that he senses that like. At least like for me personally, I'm a little annoyed with Harvard. Like, first of all, I look at the professor who was like, or the president who was caught plagiarizing her work. And at the same time, I'm like, why do I see more qualified than her? And like, she has a bunch of just like, I don't know. I guess I'm also associating her with all like the gender stuff and the DEI stuff. But I see her and I'm like, why is this person running stuff? You know what I mean? Like the tip of the spear of like Western intellectual thought. And
well, look, whatever she's doing, it seems to be working.
I mean, in what way? Like
Harvard is the best university in the world.
They're losing credibility pretty fast, though, right? Because
I don't think so.
I thought maybe this doesn't apply specifically to Harvard, but I thought basically as universities are lowering their standards for people to get in so they can increase their body base, that they also
Harvard hasn't lowered its standards. Well, they accept like 9,000 students a year or something like this, or maybe 8,000 students a year, and that's been pretty consistent. I mean, like they probably accept more now than they did it 50 years ago because the population's bigger. But no, Harvard's still like.
Okay, I guess I should clarify a little bit. My understanding was that like, basically, and I do have to go like really soon.
That's fine. That's fine.
I'll head out. But my understanding was that basically because you want to have you can't give out different tests to different people because that's illegal. But you also want to make sure that your student body is representative of the population, and because there is diversity amongst the general population, basically you loosen the constraints about who is considered and who is not. And then once you do that, then you can basically select people based off other merits other than just purely academic skill. But even when you're looking at
if you want to have a DEI conversation, you can. If you want to have a DEI conversation, you can. And there was a whole Supreme Court case about that. That's irrelevant to why the research funding was cut to Harvard. It's irrelevant.
Well, if the researchers are worse, that's actually not. No.
The researchers were demonstrably not worse because they were the best they still are the best university in the world.
But I'm explaining how they're not using as rigorous merit-based selection as they used to. And like I said, even with the groups
so
they're
to be clear, they're still the best university in the world.
That's fair. But they're switching
so
more to
whatever they're doing is
the
working.
old world where they're doing it based on nepotism, basically.
Whatever they're doing is working, right? Whatever they're doing is working.
I mean, it's working best in any university in the world, but that doesn't mean that it's declining.
So why would you single out the best university in the world? Why would you single out the best university in the world then, if what they're doing is working?
Well, I'm saying that what they're doing is, first of all, something that all universities are doing. So you wouldn't just see like them sink below other universities, essentially. But I guess why wouldn't you? I mean, it's kind of like the Ivy League. It's like the pure gemstone of what university should be, and if it's doing things that are not correctly, I mean.
Well, but apparently they're doing it fine because Harvard is producing brilliant research.
I think that
like you're running this counterfactual that like, oh, if they only accepted the rich white people and the rich Asian people, then they would produce better research. But there's no evidence of that.
I didn't say that.
That's what the DEI lawsuits were about, by the way. The affirmative action lawsuits.
Like, so for instance, for like I know a black med student and an Asian med student, the graduation difference as far as like grades and then after performance is about 2 standard deviations, which is insane. Like that is insane.
So you're talking about like grades in med school, or are you talking about like the number of people relative, like what numbers are you talking about here? Can you give me a source for that?
I think the humanities have degenerated a lot because
has nothing to do with the sciences, which is what we're talking about. But can you give me a source for that claim they made? Because I'm a little bit skeptical of that, to be honest.
Because it informs what sort of things you research. Like the
so can you give me a source for that claim, by the way?
Which one?
The claim that black med students are like 2 standard deviations below Asian med students.
I can probably find some graphs on my computer. I don't know. I would have read this a long time ago, but there's a lot of facts that like you can look at that from like the SAT score all the way through. There's lots of places.
Well, so you referred specifically to med student graduation rates, right?
Yeah. That's just one I knew exactly in my head. But like, you could also look at just SAT scores and admissions at that level, and you could also look at like afterwards and using examples. Oh yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. But yeah, like you.
Well, I mean, look. So then, like, if you have the sources, then we can look at them. Otherwise, it just sounds like you're talking out your ass.
I mean, the difference because of the way they do selection is generally it's actually through and through the differences that you see in testing. Basically, it's a little bit different. It's actually a little. The testing you would think could actually make from what you look at from pure testing, you'd actually think that the gaps in performance would be slightly smaller than they actually are. So it's which is even worse than you would think, basically.
But again, you're just like if you can give me a source, then we can look at it. But otherwise you're just talking out your ass.
I mean, I have a book right now. It's called The Bell Curve. I can pull that up.
Oh, don't cite the bell curve.
No, it's a bell curve is good science, though. It's actually supported.
I don't think that it is.
Most people don't really know what's in it. It's actually, in a way, it actually predicts Trump, and that's like a very incredible way. But
the bell. So just to be clear, the bell curve as a book has received so much criticism for like the scientific information it contains.
Mostly from Stephen Jay Gould, and his arguments are bungus. He's basically saying that
mostly from Stephen Jay Gould. I don't think that's true.
Yeah, it's from Stephen Jay Gould or people who don't know what's in the book, because people are basically saying that we don't. People, for one, say that the book's about claiming that IQ is genetic, which is not in the book. It has nothing to do with that.
So I'm just pulling up random criticisms. William J. Matthews writes that part of the bell curve's analysis is based on the Armed Forces qualification test, quote, which is not an IQ test, but designed to predict performance of certain criterion variables.
That was the first IQ test. It wasn't an IQ test because IQ test doesn't exist back then. You know what I mean? I mean, that's one thing that they.
So it's not so to be clear, it's not an IQ test.
I mean, it like in the same way an SAT score isn't an IQ test. You know what I mean? It's not claimed to be, and frankly, it was invented before IQ tests even were invented. But it's a test that captures G, and that's the important part.
Well, I think that's the claim under contention, right? So Heckman observed that the AFQT. Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what G is and why it's called G.
It's general intelligence, is it not?
Yeah, and it correlates to all other of the individual factors of intelligence that people try and measure, whether it's like
Well, the
memory,
question, so
math,
look,
like language.
so
Obviously, as they
I mean, look, I'm not particularly sold that this is particularly good science, considering how severe the criticisms have been from like across academic fields, from like neuroscientists to linguists to.
Because honestly, within the social sciences, he's best friends with the guy Robert Putnam, who's one of the greatest social scientists of our time. Like there are plenty of neuroscientists. He even writes this in the book. Like lots of neuroscientists just agree with me, but they just don't. They're not interested in getting in a political conversation, you know. And he actually had a recent book that just came out about like an adjacent topic, I guess. But like, yeah, no, he's like like, what do you think is incorrect about it? I guess. Like,
so I haven't read the book. I haven't read the book. What I've read is that the people in the field, like if you bring this up to like an academic in say in neurobiology, in sociology, in linguistics, if you bring up this book to any of the people that the subject touches on, from what I've heard, they don't take it seriously.
Well, like from what I've seen, the people who criticize the book are mostly journalists who have no idea what they're talking about, or like just a scientist who is not in any of those fields. So I mean, like if you want to like address a specific claim, I can like talk it through with you because I've read the entire book through and through to its appendix. Like yeah, like it's mostly what people tag it for is they say like, oh my gosh, you used this reference from these people from the 1950s who are white supremacists. It's like stuff like that. But first of all, there's lots of figures, and like that doesn't really matter as far as like when you're just trying to look at the data like that they collected.
So your claim is that you're getting is the information that you're getting, this information regarding statistical distributions of like, you know, Black medical students success rates and versus Asian medical student success rates, is this in the book and is it cited?
I don't remember. I mean, I don't remember exactly, but yeah, it is.
Okay, well, you should check if it's cited.
The study that I'm referring, but I was thinking about, I'm pretty sure is much more recent. Would have been
okay. Well, if you want to talk about the study, we can.
Stuff that's written in the book, because
otherwise, I don't know why I should take it seriously.
One of the core findings of the book is that the difference that you see between IQ tests and students, like, you know what I mean, as far as you see, it's like about a standard deviation between white students and black students. You see a standard deviation between white Harvard students and black Harvard students because they're just taking 15% of each top. They're basically segregating by race and taking the top 15%. I mean, that's not actually what they're doing, but that is the outcome. The outcome is always the same, no matter what method the different universities use. That's like the goal, and that's what ends up happening.
So if you want to talk about the studies, we can. Otherwise you're just saying things and I don't have really a reason to believe you.
I really don't have time, but like, yeah, like what do you not believe in IQ tests? Like what's your issue here? Like, you think they're not captured?
I mean the claim that like black students graduate, like I don't even know what the explicit claim was, but it sounded like you said that like black student graduation rate in medical school was 2 standard deviations lower than like Asian students.
And by the way, I'm mixed if that actually.
For example, it's not really relevant to the question. So like that was one claim that you made. You said you kind of alluded to it being in the book, and then you said that it's actually from something more recent. So I don't know if you want to.
Another data point is that half.
No, hold on. I don't want more data points. I want sources.
Sorry, what do you want?
I want sources.
Okay. I mean, I can find it. I mean, like this isn't hard to look up. You can just look up like. I guess I have some on my computer. Anyways, I mean, you can look up this too. I mean, just to give an idea so you can visualize it, like half of all black students are in the bottom 10% of grades at every level, from Ivy League down to the bottom, and except for at historically black colleges. You know what I mean? So that's another indication of what I'm talking about. And so
look, I don't want more data points. I want sources. Okay. Either we can talk about sources, or we can talk about, or we can talk about something that's like
trying to leave to go to work.
Okay, if you're trying to leave, that's fine. We don't have to keep going. But look, all I'm saying is that if you're going to make a claim, that I don't think is like unless you're making the claim that that the scientific consensus is that yeah, like this is just absolutely the case.
The consensus for the last like 30 years, but the consensus doesn't move with the public because people it's just not a polite conversation.
Sorry, what's the claim that you're making? That's the consensus.
That there is Like academic diversity between groups.
I agree that there is.
Okay, yeah, and it's about, like, for instance, between Asian students and Black students, it's about 2 standard deviations.
Okay, and so where can I see that data?
You can say 1.5. I'll say 1.5. 2 is like it's under 2. It's close to it.
And by the way, just to be clear,
I don't know, man.
hold on. So saying 1.5 standard deviations, 1.5 standard deviations of 1.5 standard deviations of what? Like, are we talking that the are we talking about the so if you hold on. When you say 1.5 when you say 1.5 standard deviations, are you referring to you have like the rate, like the graduation rate of the total population year over year has some average, and then there's a standard deviation of that average of the graduation rate, and then you're saying that if you look at the total population, if you look at the Black population of graduation rate in medical school, say, then using the standard deviation of the whole population, they are 1.5 standard deviations lower than the Asian population. Is that the claim?
I'm saying that when you look at ACT scores for med school, the difference between Asian students and Black students is about 2 standard deviations.
Okay, but how big is the standard deviation? What do you? How big is the standard deviation here?
How much those are an indicator?
Hold on. How big is the standard deviation?
That they underpredict the difference.
How big is the standard deviation here? That's the question.
Standard deviation.
Because
that's a math.
No. But look. If you say that there's a difference of 2 standard deviations, but the standard deviation is 1% of the effect, then it's not a big difference.
A standard deviation of 15.
Are you talking? So a standard deviation of 15 is for IQ. What is the standard deviation of the thing that you're measuring?
Dude, you know what standard deviation is? It's a standard deviation.
It tells you about the width of the it's of the bell curve. Actually, it's the width of the Gaussian distribution. But if the Gaussian distribution is very, very narrow, if the Gaussian distribution is very, very if the Gaussian distribution is very, very narrow, then what that means is that a 2 standard deviation difference between 2 groups could be a very, very small difference.
I'll tell you what it means. Okay, so if you're 1 standard deviation above the average in anything, that means you're better than about 85% of people at it.
So it's not standardized. So okay, it doesn't seem like you're really understanding it doesn't even seem like you're. It doesn't seem like you're even understanding what a standard deviation is. To be honest. Like no, but like really, you're saying like it's like 15. Like no, it's not. Standard deviation is a measure of the width of a Gaussian distribution. Now we have to know what the width of the Gaussian distribution is.
Something. It's not
14 point something what percent?
Huh?
What 14 point something what percent?
Yeah. If I'm 1 standard deviation above average in height, that means I'm taller than about 84% of the population. If I'm 2 standard
no. So what is the thing that you're measuring here? That's standard deviation for histograms. If you're measuring a distribution of some quality distributed amongst that quality, that's one thing. We're talking about graduation rates. The question is what exactly are you measuring here?
I'm talking.
What is the history? What is the data that you're analyzing? Are you looking at graduation rates?
Difference in test scores.
Is the grades. Okay? So you then what? Okay. Initially, you brought up graduation rates. So are we changing to test scores?
I didn't initially bring up graduation.
You definitely did. The first data point you brought up was the difference in graduation rates amongst Black and Asian medical students.
No.
That's what you brought up.
Difference in graduation rates. I said difference in competence. I said difference in performative.
How do you measure competence?
By
the way, you did say graduation rates, but how do you measure competence of a medical student?
For a medical student, the best way you can do it is for a score that captures G, so that would be like an SAT score or like the actual.
How does that wait? So you're just using SAT scores, and we're not talking about medical students anymore.
Well, that's how you get into the class. They look at your SAT scores, and then they also have.
So then, why'd you bring up graduation rates?
I brought up graduation rates briefly in the beginning just to cite the fact
that was the first thing that you brought up.
This is so-called. I didn't bring it up in the beginning. I said that when you're looking at people who graduate, what their outcomes are like as far as their actual performance afterwards and whatnot, and their actual research capability afterwards, and just to indicate that maybe some of this research.
Wait, how are you concluding that? So what's the data that says that the research capability is lower?
People with less general problem-solving ability are slightly.
Do you have any data to suggest that Black-led research is less effective than Asian-led research? Is there data for this?
Is associated with general
you know that Richard Feynman had only a slightly above average IQ, right?
That's another myth you can look up.
He had an IQ of like 126.
That's another myth you can look up. And
Okay.
slightly above average, that's 2 standard deviations above average, 126.
That's below average for a physicist, by the way.
Sure, below average for physicists, but that's still
And
like
yet he won a Nobel Prize.
Yeah, okay, it's not 2 standard, but it's what is 2 standard deviations? I think it's 130.
So to be clear, IQ results are not explicitly linked with research efficaciousness, right?
You couldn't find another trait except for prior research history that better predicts that.
I actually don't know if that's true. Do you have any data that supports that?
Huh?
Do you have any data that supports that?
Yeah, I mean, throughout the social science, they found no factor that's more predictively powerful than G. That's
Predictively powerful at research.
Huh?
We're asking about ability to conduct research, right? That's the question. That's the thing under consideration. So to be clear, research is not just general problem solving. Absolutely not. And this is spoken as somebody who's never done research.
Plays a role in some way. I'm sure being like
there
plays a role in it too. Those things definitely play a role. But like as far as mainly it goes, you can be an asshole and be a genius, and people are forced to listen to you in a way.
I mean, it's just not the case that like IQ is the I don't even know if it's likely the case that it's the strongest driving factor in research capability.
I mean, like I said, if you could look at
is there any data that supports this?
That would be stronger. Looking
Sorry.
at prior history of that individual, but you know, like IQ tests aren't perfectly correlated with G. That's another problem.
Well, you can't perfectly measure G. So
yeah, exactly.
G is not. It's
But
not even clear if
also
G. It's not even clear if G is like a single thing.
The best predictors in research would be a mix between industriousness and IQ. And there's actually
Do you have any evidence to support any of this, or is this just like vibes?
No, this is just like finding in social science and psychology.
Okay. Can you cite the evidence then?
I can cite some evidence, but I need to go, and I think most people can accept that the biggest predictors of success in Western society is how hard you work and how smart you are. I think everyone kind of knows that's true intuitively. But yeah, there are good studies to demonstrate that is the case.
I actually bet you the biggest predictor of success is. I would actually bet that the biggest predictor of success is, at least socioeconomically, is who you know. I would imagine.
Well, smart, hardworking people are more likely to produce other smart, hardworking people, and it is.
That wasn't what I said.
As far as like opening that door, but
Yep.
you have to actually be able to fill that position once the door is opened, and there'll be a limit to that, and that'll be based on how working you are. Also,
do you think that Trump is hardworking?
How susceptible you are to stress.
Do you think that Trump is hardworking?
Yeah, definitely. He's very conscientious.
Really, you think so?
Yeah, he doesn't sleep that much, and
he golfs a lot.
I mean, he golfs. That's his way of relaxing. It's not like he's like drinking or hanging out in the evenings. Like I know he watches TV, but I think for him that's actually like a form of work, because he is like a very media heavy person. I mean, he has some reality.
I'm pretty sure that he's like spent less time in the White House than any president in the last 30 years.
I mean, maybe, but he also has nice places to live.
Well, no, I mean like he spent more time vacationing than like, you know.
I don't
know. Or doing leisure activities, I should say.
Like I wouldn't know how exactly we know that. I would say that I didn't see Biden for months at a time sometimes, so I have no idea if that's true. You know, so I don't know. I don't know what Biden was doing. He was, he's recharging his batteries or whatever, you got to do when you're.
So during Trump's first term, he made 547 trips to his properties, including 145 to Mar-a-Lago and 328 to other Trump-owned golf courses. It's estimated that he spent 307 days of his first 4 years golfing, which is likely the most of any president in U.S. history. 307 days is quite a lot, right?
307 days golfing?
307 days golfing, yeah. For 4 years?
For 4 years? I mean, so
yep.
That's like that's like spending a fourth year time leisuring.
Yeah. And this is a hardworking guy.
I don't think that's actually that. I guess I don't think that's that crazy. I mean, days. I mean, usually when people are golfing, they don't spend the whole day golfing. Is he golfing for 12 hours?
I don't know if we have that data.
Because, he is also
golfing's hard work though. Golfing is hard work. He's working while he's golfing, right?
I mean, I think that he's above average. I mean, we can argue about this. I don't think this is that like to me.
Well, no,
he's
I mean, it's
average and
like
hardworking and above
like
average.
there are certainly features that don't involve hard work and intelligence, because I don't think that anybody would say that Trump has like Trump is more than I don't think I don't even think you would say that Trump is like more than 2 standard deviations above average intelligence, right?
I'd say he's about 2. Maybe about 2.
I don't even think that he's about. I don't think that he's about to. But we would never see that. We would never see an IQ test, even though I'm sure one probably exists, because.
I mean, like,
well,
one of the reasons why I say that it's good to look at people's like prior success to try to figure that out, and he's found success in a lot of different like entrepreneurs.
He's also failed in a lot of different entrepreneurial attempts, right?
But that's just what creative people are. Most new ideas are bad. You know what I mean? And then you have one that's good. You have 10 bad ideas, one works. That's pretty common.
So that's tenaciousness. That's not being good at problem solving, then, right?
Oh, I mean, well, it is associated with an entrepreneurial mindset, which
but
is
that
really...
that has nothing to do with ability to problem solve, right?
I wouldn't say that it has nothing to do now, because like from the reasons I just said. But tenaciousness, being hardworking, like, you know, and also not being too neurotic, because stress. If you get too stressed out from entropy, then like, you know, you don't want to be managing a very big system. So
I mean, like
I'm listening to
it's not clear at all that Trump has like been particularly high achieving as far as business goes. Well, okay, I should rephrase. Has not been particularly high achieving as far as upstanding business goes. Right? I mean, like, there are definitely cases where that there are definitely things that have been like in some sense successful, but perhaps successful because things are because he did things that are perhaps very morally gray or even morally bankrupt, which, you know, can generally give you advantages.
Building in New York is can be kind of a rough, that it's very cutthroat amongst the builders in New York, and it's pretty hard.
Well, I mean things like you know, the like his hiring practices. We have like Trump University being, you know, fraudulent. We have things that are like really sus. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. This is all to say, it's not clear at all to me, and I mean, if you have data that says otherwise, I'd be happy to change my mind, but it's not clear at all to me that like G can be accurately measured. It's also not clear at all to me that G is the most like the biggest predictor of research success, and it's not clear at all to me that Harvard could have produced better research had it changed its policy, and it's not clear at all to me that the best way to get Harvard to change its policy is to cut $450 million of funding, much of which was going to biomedical research, including cancer research. So it just seems like there's a whole lot of assumptions that you're making in order to justify Trump's anti-science position.
I can differentiate this a little bit real quick. So, like, obviously you can't find a perfect measure of G, but IQ tests are a good measure, and we know that because they have good predictive validity. It changes depending on how cognitively demanding the job is, as far as how predictive IQ is at your success at it, which is obvious, in a way. So, like, if you're at a top pursuit, like being a lawyer, something like that, the predictive power of IQ is somewhere between like 0.6 to like 0.8.
Okay, but that's great. That's great, but we weren't talking about being a lawyer. We were talking about doing research.
And 80% of the variable is a large point.
Yes, and we were talking about research, not being a lawyer.
Well, being a lawyer, a lot of what being a lawyer is research, basically. It's reading a lot.
The problems. So to be clear, the kind of research. So speaking as somebody who has done academic research, and speaking as somebody who is married to somebody who has done legal research, these are not the same kind of research. These are not remotely the same kinds of problems or the same kind of skills.
Into different subgroups of intelligence too. So like lawyers are higher in a linguistic IQ. They both co-vary under the same G.
My point is that you're
more statistically gifted, have a more spatial.
Do you see how you're making an assumption that the IQ correlation between success in being a lawyer and sorry, let me rephrase. You're making an assumption that because IQ correlates with success being a lawyer, whatever success, however success is measured, is somehow therefore informative on IQ being correlated with success in research. That's an assumption that you're making. That's not backed up by the data.
There are directly tests that show that people who have more publishing, who have a better what's the term? Well, yeah, who have a better what's the score that they use to determine how well cited a person is? That's
H
correlated with
sometimes.
IQ tests as well. And your
H.
Yeah, your H index. Yeah. That's also
Okay.
by,
So suppose that that's true. Well, then,
I mean, is it that surprising that how smart you are? Like, is the correlation between?
I mean,
how,
so as someone in an academic field, I can see the kind of people who are successful, and they're not the smartest people in the room.
They're not the smartest, but just like, you're not going to have a linebacker who's like, 180 pounds. They're all going to be over 200 pounds. Doesn't mean the heaviest one is the best one. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a restricted thing.
So look, my point is that like if you have the data, by all means, but there are a series of
like 50 claims.
there are a series of inferential leaps that you're making, or a series of inferences that you're making, that are all being used to justify that it was a good decision for Trump to cut $450 million of Harvard's funding, which primarily goes to research, because somehow this is punishment for having worse scientific performance than they could have had. This is all in service of justifying that position. And I think that even if it were the case that they could have had a better scientific, even if it were the case that they could have had better scientific output had they changed certain policies, that does not at all justify cutting $450 million of scientific funding.
I'm basically saying that they have a toxic ideology, and that also impedes their research as one of the problems that it does. But I'm saying that the ideology that it's exporting, even at its core, even like just an example, I think of me trying to.
So you're right. So you're saying that they're punishing.
Is that it's anti-Semitic.
Right. So what you're saying is that they're punishing they're punishing scientists for ideological reasons.
I mean, punishing science for ideological reasons. I mean, I wouldn't say ideological reasons. No. I mean, I would say that because
Trump doesn't like the ideology of Harvard. That's what you just said, isn't it?
I wouldn't say that Trump is acting ideologically.
No, Trump doesn't like the ideology of Harvard, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like it either.
Well, right. So that's an ideological reason, because Trump's ideology doesn't align with Harvard's ideology.
I don't think Harvard's old thing about like a search for truth that used to be on the banner and all that pluribus unum and all that. Like, I don't think that that's an ideology. I think that stuff was all just like. I think it's all just kind of base level. It's just like true. It's like a math claim almost. It's like that stuff.
That's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Trump doesn't like the ideology that Harvard has, meaning that Trump's ideology doesn't align with Harvard's ideology, and so Trump is punishing scientists for it.
I mean, that's a consequence, but I also think that the scientists have been the scientists all had to take.
We agree. That's a consequence. So Trump is punishing scientists.
I'm saying the researchers agreed to stamp themselves to a diversity pledge. They agreed to that. They didn't have to do that.
Yeah, so Trump is punishing scientists because he doesn't like the ideology.
I mean,
that's anti-science.
Like communist scientists? You know what I mean? To be punished the scientists who are building.
No, you shouldn't punish scientists for political views.
I mean, what if they're doing something dangerous?
Then that's not a political view. That's just dangerous.
A political view can be dangerous.
A political view can inform dangerous. Political views can inform dangerous decisions.
About the Jews.
Political positions can inform dangerous positions. Sure. It can inform dangerous decisions.
Political positions can be dangerous outright. I mean, ideas are ideas. They're living. I mean, they have a specific structure. They have a specific spirit when they grip people and all that.
So, look, let's say I grant that. Is it good to punish scientists? Punish all of the scientists at a university as a result of some political view that you don't like that university is pushing?
Well, look, how do you feel about Operation Paperclip? Do you know about what that was?
Yeah, I was bringing all the Yahtzee scientists over to the U.S. to work on nuclear testing stuff.
do you think that if someone said no, we should hold those people account and punish them? Do you think that would be okay, even if assuming that these people didn't commit crimes directly themselves, but they maybe
no, people should be punished for the crimes that they commit. People should be punished for the crimes that they commit.
But do you think maybe that, I mean, it's not necessarily about a punishment. It's actually not giving you a benefit, which is different. It's not a punishment. It's not giving a benefit.
Well, if they had something and then you're taking it away, that's a punishment, right?
Yeah, but it's something that you gave to them. So like, yeah, I see what you're saying, but it's not like I'm gonna stop giving this to you. It's not like,
yeah, that's a punishment. That's a punishment.
They didn't go in their pockets and take away money they already gave them. They said we're not going to continue.
I mean, to be clear, like that is
from like a subjective perspective. It's like I was getting food from you every day, and now I'm pissed that I'm not. But like, yeah.
I mean, like, to be clear, like that. If a kid is getting an allowance from their parents, and then they break a window while they're playing baseball, and their parents, punish them by not giving them their allowance that week, that's a punishment.
Yeah, that's fair. I just want to get that understanding that that's what's happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah. And so what you're saying is that we should punish scientists for the views of the university?
I mean, what did you
we should punish people for the things that they do.
It wasn't just Trump. I mean, a lot of people pulled their money after that scandal. You know what I mean? So I don't think it's just Trump that had an issue with that.
Yeah, it's MAGA.
I mean, it's not just MAGA. I mean,
it's absolutely MAGA.
Is Bill Ackman MAGA?
Let's find out. I have no idea. I don't know who he is.
No, I think he was a left-wing supporter all the way through and through until recently, when all the Harvard professors were all saying that, and it was like his final straw, being like, "What the heck is going on here?"
He voted for Trump in 2016.
In 2016, I know that, but not in 2020.
No, that was just the earliest one that I saw. I don't know if he voted for Trump in 2020. I don't see. So he supported the Democratic Party and endorsed Congressman Dean Phillips for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2024. Phillips floated a possible cabinet position for him. Okay, so that kind of checks out. He donated to RFK's presidential campaign in 2024 following the suspension of Phillips' candidacy. He announced he didn't support Joe Biden in 2024. He endorsed Trump in 2024. I don't have any information on what he did in 2020.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think I'm guessing he probably supported Biden, just because from the stuff that I heard about him and from what he kind of gave across, was that like, I've been supporting the Democrats and I can't anymore. That's kind of what he said.
Well, he voted for Trump in 2016, so like, it's not like he was supporting the Democrats, right?
Huh?
He voted for Trump in 2016.
Yeah, no, but exactly. So maybe he was closer to a Republican than a lot of other people, because apparently Hillary Clinton was bad enough for who voted for Trump.
Okay, so in 2020,
I thought Trump would win.
So in 2020, I'm just looking at his donations. So in 2020, he donated to, sorry, this is 2018, 2019. Okay, so he donated $2,800 to Mark Kelly, based. We like Mark Kelly. And then he donated, he had like a few small donations to other Democrats. He had a few small donations to some Republicans, like Adam Kinzinger. He donated $1 million to vote for New York City's future. Oh, that was recent. So I'm just looking at 2020. I'm sorry. In 2020, he donated $250,000 to Ranked Choice Voting 2020 committee, and then he had a few small donations to, I guess, some local Democrats. But he didn't. It doesn't look like he donated to the Biden campaign.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't. I mean, yeah, I'm actually, like, I know from my perspective, I found the whole university or college system. I went to community college and I dropped out because I didn't want to get a booster.
That's insane, by the way.
Huh?
That's insane.
I mean, not really. I mean, why would I want to, like, there was no reason for me to get a booster at that
No,
point.
it's insane that you would drop out and forgo future earnings as a result of, because you didn't want to get a booster. Like, that's an insanely bad decision.
Maybe. I mean, it's I think it's a principled decision. I'm happy I went with it, honestly.
Right. Like, it's just like unintelligent, right?
I don't think so.
Because you have sacrificed long-term earnings, long-term gains, long-term, everything for an ideological reason that would have essentially no influence on your life.
At the time, I was still signing up for film classes, so it's not like you'd be even that financially.
Having an associate's degree at all increases your earning potential over having just a high school diploma.
Maybe. That's not like the best factor of predicting that. You know what I mean? Like, but I'm sure. But it's just not something that was like particularly like didn't seem like it was for me, I could say. Like, I spent most of my time arguing about...
I mean, look, if it wasn't for you for other reasons, then I can understand that. But, like, if it was just because you didn't want to get a booster, that's insane.
Well, they dropped me from my classes because of that. I didn't sign back up, basically. Because I didn't get a booster, like, in, like, 2023 or something ridiculous.
I know, and all I'm saying is that that's, like... Well,
it was like
young people make bad decisions. Hopefully you'll get smart. You have to go to work, so I'm gonna let you go, and I have to end the live anyway. But thanks for being here, John Jackson. Have a good one.
Thank you. You too.
All right, y'all. We've been on for almost 4 hours. I am past my noon cutoff, so yeah. Anyway, thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys. Oh, do we have any super chats that I have to read? Let me check. We do have some super chats. Garba Gaiman with the 5 Canuck bucks says, this study shows there's lots of ways to be wrong. Oh, no, I already read that. Okay, the no extra super chats. We do have a $2 cash app from one person named Seabar, which thank you very much for the $2 cash app. That probably was wasted time. I should have kicked him earlier, but he's been on before and he's generally a decent guy, but he's also, university would have been good for him. Anyway, let me double check, make sure I didn't miss anything. All right, I'm going to end the live, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for more debates at around the same time, around 9 in the morning, Pacific time, or 9 in the morning, I guess, Mountain time. All right, take care, everybody. Oh, $5 from Ivan. Previous guest, white Nepo man golfing, hardworking, but black people studying at Harvard equals question mark, question mark, question mark. Too hard to say something nice. Yeah, fair. Fair. All right, take care, everybody.